degradation. Some of you were here for his last presentation, and he invited those of you that were here to come, ask any questions, because it was a rather lengthy presentation. So, without further ado, Brother William Mackey. Let's welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Is this place warm enough to keep my African behind from freezing? I'm testing y'all, then I'll take mine off. How y'all doing today? Well, the first thing I want to say after thanking you for coming is to ask you to buckle your seat belts, because even though I'm a little tired, it's probably going to be a long night. And it's not that I like talking that much, which of course I do, being a Georgia Geechee, but it is because this topic, I think, demands it, whether I'm dealing with it or whether somebody else deals with it. As Brother Yusuf said, and come here, bring your butt up here. Come here. You. I said bring your behind up here when the elder speaks. If you don't believe it, you see these are a couple of my sisters. This is, get your butt up. I'm talking to you, boy. He'll come, pick me up, bad weather, and like whatnot. She supports me as a student, friend, whatnot. These are the things that we need every day, you see, because I'm kind of weak. But as long as I got these young dudes and these beautiful sisters, thank God for them, and thank God for all of y'all. Give them a hand. You embarrassed? He's only got one bad habit. He loves to give white folks in toll booth his money. Or the system. He decided today, a little bit of levity never hurts. Nobody says that learning has to be painful. On coming out today, he called and he says, well, the one way I know is the Brooklyn Bridge, but of course the white folks decided that we don't need that on weekends. They cut me off last night. So he said the only other way on the phone that I know is to go to Verrazano Bridge. So when he came, I said, well, we'll go the same route because we can also get the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. And we have to go in the same direction. Finally, when we get at the foot of Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn, he realizes that, he said, this is the route we go, the Bell Parkway, which takes you both to the Battery Tunnel and also the Verrazano Bridge. And of course, little did I know, they did it to me again. We get off at the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel route because he wanted to go Verrazano. And they had closed off all the entrances to the Battery Tunnel. We walked about 10 minutes out of the way, so he said, well, I guess we won't look for the Battery Tunnel anymore. We'll go Verrazano. And so no problem. As we approached there, Miss Diane Sanders' friend says, well, let me give you some money to pay the toll. And Brother Yusuf said, oh, no, that's all right, no question, I've got it, it's all, but not, because I ain't been that way for a long time. It's called the back door. As we get up to approach the toll booth, he says, is that what I sees up there? $5.00, $5. The last time I had crossed the bridge, it was 50 cents. So all of a sudden he says, I don't have $5. So he had to reach back and accept Sister Sanders' $5 anyway, right? Then we come off to go through bridge, and they rip us off for $4 more. And he insisted when we came off the bridge in Elizabeth, I wanted to take 1 and 9. Being a Geechee, same thing. But no, he's got to give them 85 cents more. So we got here eventually. But I'm just citing this to say that he's a beautiful brother, but what keeps him more human, I could have used them $9. But at least we got here, and of course, as my grandmother and fate would have it, the key hadn't gotten here first, so we turned out to be early. I felt good about that because I would rather the key not be here and than be late. And by way of introduction, one of the reasons that we are involved in this, if anybody is still not aware, is the thing that they've been trying to do to our brother and your neighbor, Len Jeffries. And I want to state right off, as we discussed it here, and I was just giving Nefertiti here, my colleague, the real background of what has happened. I spent all of Friday afternoon in Dr. J's office at his invitation. I lectured for him at Convent Avenue Baptist Church on Friday evening, and lectured for his class at City College yesterday, which ran from about 1 until about 7, because he had to go to a reunion in Chicago. But he asked me, because he knows I'm always trying to mess with people, to inform his supporters, because he knows you're not going to get it from the press, that he's having the time of his life. These are his words, that he's getting stronger, and every time they do something, it's boomeranging. And he says the reason this has happened is because of the support of y'all out here. The grassroots, the real grassroots, which is the reason, if you might have heard this, I wouldn't even call him a Negro, I wouldn't insult a Negro, this gentleman who calls himself the president, Mr. Halson, last Monday or Tuesday on WLIB, he had to make the admission I would fire him. But if I did, the community of Harlem, where we are, would not tolerate it. And I would say amen. Think of what that's saying. What he's saying is, as I just said to Bob Sender, you're talking about what we used to describe as black power. In other words, this school sits in the middle of our community. And we need to look at the background to understand what is happening. So he asked me, before I got into the lecture, to just give you a bit of the background of what is happening, not that you may not already know it, so that you don't be taken in by the rhetoric of what you're hearing. As African people living in this Vale of Tears, you must know by now that if they could have iced him, he would have already been iced. You must know that. If there was any way that they could have gotten him, they were already iced. So I think, as I just got through telling her, we need to spend a few minutes looking at what the fact. Yes?
I'm sorry, I want to say something. I put my hand up because when you're talking about Dr. Jefferson,
Yes.
I heard something on the radio. I didn't want to forget that before you go.
Go ahead.
Is it all right?
Yes.
Okay, I was listening to 98.7. I don't know if anybody listens
Mhm.
to here this morning. And they were talking about Lynn Jeffries, and they said that Bob Sled said, well, I wish he stopped saying things because every time he said something, I'm really surprised. I thought they were very supportive that he's going to get himself in more trouble. And then the other girl, I don't know her name, she said, well, you should act like David Duke and say, I pretend to have changed. Then on the next breath, they're saying that they can't wait till all the truth is out because they gave us credit for giving this country 75% of the music, which we created. And they gave us credit for having superior bodies in sports. So she says now when the intellectual part comes out, when the true history comes out, then they're going to have to adhere to the fact that we are more intellectual. I don't know if that's correct.
Whatever, yes.
Okay.
But this is a statement.
This is what they were saying. I was so disappointed that they were saying that he should stop saying things, but how are we going to get the message if he doesn't continue to lecture and to talk? Because he's saying now, Bob Sled that said that the gays are going to be against him because he's saying that the white man introduced homosexuality to the black man, so that's going to turn gays against him, which I don't believe that's going to happen. I don't think he's saying that. But this is what I got mixed emotions from Bob Sled.
All right.
Sledge or whatever.
It's important because what we're talking about here, and I want to, because that's why we've got, if we can't look at these things, we've got to take the holistic approach to look at how everything, every part is everything else, because they divert us. You all know my classic example. The magician, when he wants to trick you, the first thing he does is divert your attention.
Right.
He distracts your attention over here, then he pulls the 20,000-pound elephant out of the silk hat.
Right.
Your intelligence tells you that ain't possible. But what you do, we get so mesmerized with how did he do that? So you forget the reality of the impossible. And this is the trick bag, some of you used to say, which they're caught in, and they do this. They take this approach on the belief, more and more mistaken I believe, that we are not capable of thinking. But that doesn't talk about motivation. Now, this is why we need to look at the background. We need to understand that when we talk about Follywood and the role played by that group and the organized crime in the degradation of our people, we have to put that in order to understand it and to get some decency out of it. We must put that within the holistic perspective of the total that impinges on our people negatively. In other words, after we have said that the Russian, Eastern European Jews, and it's important to understand that, who created and dominated Hollywood, helped to create in collusion with the underworld negative images of our people. Even after we have, quote, proven and convicted them of that, we still have not answered why, have we? You follow what I'm saying? They didn't create racism. You follow where I'm coming from? And as they said, and one of the excuses that they have tried to use is, well, we didn't invent racism. When we came here, we just fell in with whatever was happening. Everybody uses this excuse. Now, you might have fallen in with what was happening, but this is like saying that I walked in here, and when I came in here, everybody in this room had you down there beating you with a strap. And so I come in and I pick up the strap, and I beat on you too. When somebody comes and catch me beating on you, or, well, after all, I'm just beating on her because everybody else was doing it. Does that justify it? You see, that's the gimmick. That's the magician again, diverting your attention so that you don't deal in terms of the reality. Now, a lot of our people, I would argue, is in this bag, whether voluntarily or not. We need to understand clearly what the process is with acid. First of all, looking at that, I said to you, this so-called controversy around Dr. Jefferson is going on about almost 3 months now. He's still, as I speak, he's still the chairperson of the Africana Studies Department in City University, City College of New York. Now, there's nobody in this room who has reached their maturation who have not had to deal with European folks at some time yet. You must know by now that if these people set their hats to get you, they are relentless in their pursuit. Yes or no? Yes. They're relentless in their pursuit. Now, if they've been after him for 3 months, he even started before he could defend himself. He was over in Africa when they started the ranting and the raiding. Right? The assumption then was that he would have been dead, crucified, and buried before he could even have gotten off a plane to come back to defend himself. I beg your pardon?
I don't get your point. How would he have been crucified? I don't understand.
Well, the goal was to kill him and have it over with before he could even get back here from Africa.
Oh, you mean send somebody in Africa to get
No, ma'am. No, they meant to have, in terms of getting him away from City College, of getting him out of that department. In other words, and this is, you can see this by way of how things develop. The New York Post played this piece, and I hope I'm not boring you unduly if you don't know, because you know, right? All right, so we need to understand some of the background if you don't. For those of you who do, please bear with us because the brothers and sisters will. The speech where Jeffries made the remarks was July 21st, 1991, at a gathering of black folks, a couple thing, at Empire State College, of which I teach in the Manhattan branch, in Albany. That was taped. After making the speech, because he had already made his commitment arrangements to go to Africa, he went to Africa. He had already, the speech was 3 weeks old. Did you know that? All right, now, when the hell is a newspaper, any newspaper, interested in printing 3 weeks old news? What kind of news do we call that? Stale news. Who the hell buys it for this? The New York Post looked at it and said, this is the Leonard Jeffries who is involved, the spearhead of the curriculum of, they call it curriculum of inclusion, we call it the curriculum of correction, which is threatening the powers that be of the situation. We have to understand that. And just like education is one of those linchpins, so is entertainment. Whether we're talking about Hollywood, dance, music, jazz, All of this is part of the control. You follow me? That's why I say we've got to tie it all together in a holistic way. Now, at some point, this big fat slob, Jerry Nachman, who is the editor of the Post, and let's tie it all in since you asked this so you understand clearly what's involved the next time you see them running off. Pay no attention to the rhetoric. Because they're not telling you what has actually happened or what is really real. All we have to know as black folks, we might not know all of the details, but we know how these people function. And if there was a way they could have gotten him, he would have already have been gotten. This is the third month now. Yes, ma'am.
There was a good article in the City Sun this week. The fact that no one has dealt with the question of the correctness of the statement.
Precisely. And you guess where we're going, because that's the other thing. What did I just say to you? The magician does what? Diverts your attention over here. And while he's got all this going on over here, you don't notice that the emperor is naked. And they run this game on. So this is what we're saying. Look beyond, or try to understand. And if you cannot find out what's beyond, reserve your opinion. Say nothing. Because to say something with half information is most times worse than saying nothing. The old people once when I was growing up would beat our butt for talking out of turn to white folks. But we've lost certain things in that. So we have to try to get back this. Now, why are we saying this? They took 4 paragraphs out of the speech. They said this is the way we can get him, because they put the thorn in the side. As he said in the speech, they set up what they thought was a stacked deck to run a game by the curriculum correction. The game didn't go down because Jeffries and other people spearheaded, and their safe committee voted in change of a curriculum. How can you not do this when you take a big land mass like Africa, Egypt, and take it out of Africa? And when you ask, where the hell is Egypt? And what was their answer? We will deal with that later in another part of the world. Now that's a neat trick, ain't it? Another part of the world. I'm going to just rip it off. I don't want it to be there. Now, when that didn't go that way, when they saw this thing, whoever the hell gave it to them, they said, here's a chance to get at it, because if we can destroy him down, discredit him, then everything will be equal. We won't have to look at curriculum inclusion, because they try to pass it off as something that we were looking at as a black-white thing. That is not what we said. The curriculum of inclusion just says a correction of history. The next attack, feel-good history. George Will and them. You're talking about feel-good history. The next one, Arthur Schlesinger Jr., it's obvious that blacks are concerned, and they mention Leonard Jeffries in particular. This is long before this thing came up. They've been after this man for 2 years. And said, it is obvious to me that black people in this country are determined to invent themselves a history. Now, when you make a statement like that, what are you saying? You're really saying, it's another way of saying that black folks ain't got no history. Then comes out with the book, The Disuniting of America. And, of course, who is to blame for the disuniting of America? Mose and Mosetta, according to them. Who paid for the book? Federal Express. Advertising all through a book that's supposed to be scholarship. Jeffries pointed that out. Can they deny it? Go buy the damn book. It's out there. Now, if they don't deal with the issues that he made or anybody made, that seems to me to go the most obvious way to go. If I'm lying to you, go get the refutation. That's simple. Prove me a liar. Calling me a names don't change nothing, does it, class? No. Now, and when you look at what they did, when they thought they saw this, Fred Dicker took 4 paragraphs out of the speech, sent copies of it off to Governor Cuomo, copies off to the state legislature of New York, copies to the senatorial delegation of New York, Alphonse D'Amato, and the congressional delegation, This was made by a man who's the chairman of a major department of one of our major city universities, tax-supported. Now watch where the institutional racism comes in. What is Cuomo's profession, y'all? Who said that? He's a lawyer. What is D'Amato's profession? What about Herman Badillo? He's a lawyer. What are the professions of most of the people who sit in the New Jersey state legislature or the New York legislature? What are they? All right. Now here you had D'Amato, Badillo, and Cuomo coming out calling Jeffries all kinds of names. Watch what I'm saying to you now. Based on something that a newspaper said, this is a forecast. This is, now they represented this as the transcript of Jeffries' speech, not an excerpt. A transcript of a speech that Dr. Leonard Jeffries delivered July 21st, etc., etc. Now, under normal circumstances, the reason I asked about a lawyer, and lawyers who are politicians, would they normally deliver themselves of a diatribe just based on that? No. They would first call the secretary and say, listen, we've got this, looks like it may be dynamite. Do some checking and get back to me. Isn't that the standard procedure? Why didn't they follow this procedure in the case of Leonard Jeffries? Because Leonard Jeffries is black. And if he's black, like you're black, that meant that all bets were off. They lost all of their usual caution of common sense. Go get the nigger. And they became like what Clarence Thomas in another connection said, and I didn't think too much of him, a high-tech lynching. And the high-tech represents the media and all this, and that's exactly right. Boom. And not only this, but he ain't even here to defend himself. So that's what I mean. So we get that in, bam, 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 and you can put enough pressure on the city university, on the board of trustees. But boom, get rid of boom, they'll have to remove him. But what they haven't told you with all of this smoke, as I just shared with Ms. Nefertiti here, they left out certain very crucial parts. First of all, and that's why the Post and all of them was running on Jeffries' case, because my grandma used to say, and I found that to be true, talking louder don't make you no more right. Talking louder can oftentimes be just talking louder. And if you assume that if I have more volume, if I can yell louder than this little baby here, then therefore I'm right. That don't make it right. The child can be right and not open its mouth. So usually say when you hear somebody yelling and screaming about something to the top of their lungs, this is an ex-slave woman told me, usually it means that they ain't got nothing to back it up with. How many people in here want to disagree with that analogy? The louder you yell, the closer you look to see what is really there. But the racism got the best of them, and the fact that they also didn't want to change the curriculum, and so there they were, boogity, 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 let's go get him. And in doing the process, they stuck their behinds out. And they ain't been able to cover it up yet. And it's getting late in the day because it's getting cold out there. And they might end up with some frozen testicles. Because, let me finish, because the truth is, which none of them said, not only addressing the issue as you said, nobody has told anybody what is the procedure by which any department chairperson serves in the city university. So I will just share that basic information with you. You may already know, but it's my job to tell you. Every department in the city university is autonomous, self-governing. Is that clear? That is according to the university's bylaws. And you can see the logic of that because that prevents any power someplace else from jumping all over a department that might be going in a direction that they don't want. A university, by the very term universal, is theoretically supposed to be open to all kinds of ideas. If it ain't got no controversial ideas, it ain't serving its function as a university. It ain't supposed to be where every professor will say, yeah, me too. It's supposed to be controversial. And in the academic sense, ideas are supposed to be put out on the table. theoretically, argued before people like you, and then you let the facts go where they may. Therefore, in order to show that to the best of ability this can happen, the city university system says each department is autonomous. It has the democratic right to elect its own chairperson. The only thing that the city university requires is you can remove the chairperson for cause, but you have to have a bona fide cause. That's the law. The only other thing is that there must be an election held in every department every 3 years. Dr. Leonard Jeffries Jr., I was there when he came. Dr. Leonard Jeffries Jr. is almost rounding out his 19th year of tenure, which means that at least 10 times, or well, each time he has come up for re-election, what has the department done? They re-elected him. And they support him 100%. Now, the jackals know this. Is that the way they have been putting it out there? Of course not. They give the impression that all the administration has to do is to go in and say, you fired for cause. No. They must come to charge. What happens after that election occurs, the department informs the division dean of who the chairperson is. The dean then informs the provost. The provost informs the president. Blam, thank you, ma'am, overnight. That is the process. Would you have gotten any idea from this of what has been happening for the last year? No. The impression you get each time is that the reason he still got the job is because somebody above him didn't do it. So now you're angry, so you come out like the post said, racist professor gets slapped on the wrist. All the board met and agreed to cut down his tenure and put him on probation. What is the probation? Have they told you? Have you seen anything? I've heard people say, well, I think the probation means he can't say. Well, I said, well, what has he said now that's not necessarily different that he wasn't saying before? He's still there? Obviously, then, if he was on probation and say, go forth and sin no more, and he goes on and sin, how come they didn't can him? Obviously, because they can't. They got no grounds to. The other question, why haven't the opposition come forth with their scholars after this statement was made? We, and I am now part of that group I may have mentioned to you before that they call us, the Post referred to us as the professors of hate. We support Jeffries, so we're the professors of hate, not true. And these people who say this are journalists. All these people who've been carrying the argument are journalists. They ain't one damn academician among them. They ain't one among them who is even qualified even to argue pro or con on Jeffries. If an argument about law is going to be carried on by Sunday school teachers, what role are the lawyers supposed to play? Think about that. Would this country tolerate a bunch of Sunday school teachers making the laws and interpreting the laws which lawyers for? Would you tolerate that? Of course you wouldn't. Therefore, you notice also that the departments at City College have not been heard from. When they first went to have the faculty vote on it, they voted to take no part in it because they knew exactly. That's the whole faculty. They knew what the issue was. They knew that there was nothing they could do. Now, the other part of this is, since each department is autonomous, and let's say all of these other departments hate Leonard Jeffries' guts, can they afford to ice him? No. Because to do so would mean that they would be giving the administration a club. That make clear? Which later on, they will now establish a precedent where they can take that same club that they beat Jeffries over the head with and beat them. And they know that they will do so. So therefore, whether they like him or not, all the other departments on that university has to support it in principle, the autonomy of each department. Has any of this come out in any of your newspapers? No. And that's why I think knowing this should let you know ultimately. So now, when Badillo yelled about get rid of him, he's a racist. How many votes did Badillo have to get rid of Jeffers? How many? None. He's an ex-member of the Board of Higher Education. Oh yeah, that's right. He's a former member. So when these yo-yos went to these people like D'Amato and them asking for comments, they knew that Badillo couldn't do anything. They also was hoping that the comments of D'Amato, Cuomo, and others would put so much pressure on the board that the board would do something both stupid and illegal. Is that clear?
But is this illegal given in the one day?
Of course it is. And that's my name. Of course it is. They know this. But what I've laid out to you, that these people have been putting so much pressure on them, they had to do something. And as I said earlier to Ms. Sanders, we have to think. The Board of Higher Education don't just sit up there and make decisions. It has legal advice, legal counsel who gets paid by the Board of Higher Education for New York City. And it has to have the advice and consent of the state, because it is the state which now pays the salaries of the people of the university. In other words, when New York City almost went to fall back in the 60s and the 70s, and the state had to take it over, if you recall that, that's when they decided, and it's important that you know this, because tomorrow, those of you who live in Jersey, if it hadn't already happened here. When they looked out one morning and saw on that campus all of them young Moes and Mosettas running around there, they said, oh shit, we got a problem. So you have to look at, I think, let's look at the background. I'm not treating you like you don't know nothing, but jogging your memories. Because when you look back in the 60s, when we first started to get large representation on places like Rutgers University, which has just been made, and I'm using this for you because of those who live in New Jersey, and the City College, and Brooklyn College, and Hunter College, even though City College had been in the heart of Harlem for almost 100 years, the student body was overwhelmingly white and Jewish. There's a book called City College, The History of City College and the Jewish Poor. It's about 10 years old, but it would be worth finding it to begin to put the levels here. It was published, I think, by, I believe it was New York University Press or something, but if you call me home, but at least it's out there, and I have a copy of it. We need to look at see, that's why when you don't study, you set yourselves up for these things. And all of us like to have opinions, but a lot of us don't like to hit them books, because studying is hard. But we don't have to do to understand. Now, watch this. You see, you are the enemy as far as these people are concerned. Why? Because up until the 60s, they had these city and state universities around here most of themselves. They allowed a few token of us to go in, so you couldn't say it was there. They used to literally run black students off of City College campus. There are people who are around, Dr. John Jackson, Dr. John Henry Clark. Ask them, what happened to black students when they went on that campus back in the 20s, 30s, and 40s? And they'll tell you that the white students, many of them Jewish and others, used to routinely kick their butts. They had to go on that campus prepared to fight. And where was City College? In the middle of where? Harlem. And they ran it like an enclave. You could count the black faculty or administrative members on one hand and have 4 fingers left. That changed through the struggle of our people, not that the 60s started it, but during the 60s this explosion came, and we began looking at a whole lot of things that we hadn't been looking at before. And one of the offspring was a huge increase of African students. I don't like them hyphenated terms because we're African students on the campuses. And at that point we became a problem, just like the curriculum inclusion is an extension. The idea at that point, the media, the jackals, and I apologize to jackals, but I don't know no other animal that's close to them. Buzzards at least wait for things to die. At that point, they started bad-mouthing the quality of education at the city university system. Check me out. Oh, the standards are going down. The students are not capable of doing. I see heads nodding in agreement. The students ain't doing what? Now, they never said the black students, but anybody who looked at any of the college or state campuses could see who the newcomers was. Now, when they made these statements, they were assertions. They made these assertions without any proof. Oh, the city colleges going to the dogs. The standards are going down. When people said this to me, where do you teach? I teach them. Oh, yeah, the standards are really good. Black folks, we parrot whatever they say. I said, well, let me ask you a question. The standards are going, the education standards are going down in comparison to what? What? I said, in comparison to what? When you say standards are deteriorating, you got to have some kind of norm to judge by. Let's take inflation. If you say the dollar only buys 60 cents of what it used to buy, then you have to trace that back down to that place where a dollar bought a dollar worth or 90 cents. So you could say in 1939, you arbitrarily picked a floor. In 1939, the dollar was worth 75 cents in exchange for goods. But you at least have pegged it. You're saying now that the inflation, the dollar is now worth this much less than it was at another time. But to sit and say that the quality, educational standards have gone down, and you're not prepared to say at what point, what are you doing? You're just talking. And if they say, well, and usually what they mean, it'll slip out, when the campus was practically lily white, the students, and the campus was practically lily white with faculty and administration, and the few blacks was there was pushing the brooms them out. And you knew your place theoretically. So when I asked this, what year are you talking about? And what point? Can you give me a floor? When did the standards, when the academic standards, the academic proficiency of these students going down? You're going to have to give me a year, right? You're going to have to say, well, they went down 40% as compared to what they were in 1960 or 1949. And when I ask these brilliant people this fact, none of them can give me no answer. And you know why they can't give you no answer? Because ain't no damn body ever took no standard to see what the quality of education was at any given period. They state this arbitrarily, just like they arbitrarily call Lynn Jeffries anti-Semitic. And there's nobody now, if anybody in this room can go out to any one of these universities who make that statement, if they can show you that in such and such a year, our students were performing at this level, as opposed to now, I will eat everybody in your hat. But as my grandma used to say, you have to know them things. We have to get them to think. They make these statements as assertions, and they know they can get away with it because, A, most people don't know the history, not interested, and most of us don't think and don't even know where to start thinking to go about it. When that didn't work, the next step was, all of a sudden, God, the city university is in bad shape economically. We cannot afford to give nobody no free education. Check me out. Follow the history. That was phase 2. If I can't stop you from coming on, because up until that time you got a free education. The charter said, watch them change the rules, Tillin. The charter said anybody who lived in New York, even if you didn't live, you came to City College and you were entitled, into the city university, and you were entitled to free education. Well, when the bad mouthing didn't stop the tide, when the Beam administration came up, he came out with a statement, I'm committed to continued no tuition for the city university system. I was at City College then, and I told my colleagues, I says, hey, they're getting ready to put tuition out here. No, the man says no tuition. I said, why is he saying this? You see, you got to look the other way. He's saying this to put it on the agenda. It ain't necessary for you to tell me none news. Nobody had ever said before, I'm committed to continuing free higher education. So if you were saying it, the minute you say, I'm committed to free higher education, somebody else ought to say they ought to pay. If you never bring up the question, then let the person who says you ought to pay, let him or her bear the heat. So that was phase 2. Phase 2 didn't work, so they started to try to cut back on certain other programs, become SEEK programs, and all these other kinds of things. And they started bad-mouthing how unjustifiable students were getting this help. Students on welfare, all kind of scary stories was coming. Go check these press. Don't take my word for this. Everybody can't walk around carrying all this garbage in their head like I do, and I don't know how I do it, just does it. Lady said to me yesterday, Professor Mackey, you're a genius. Let me tell you about genius. Genius is 1% talent and 99% sweat. And if you put the 99% sweat, you can get along without the talent. That's what it is. It's work. After a while, you do something, things begin to stick. You don't have to try to just stick. Anybody in here can remember anything they want to remember if you want to remember it. There are women can tell you how many hours and days and minutes they've been married. And the husband can't even remember the month. Oh, yeah, right. So I cite that, I don't mean it as a put down, but I cite that to what we can do with our minds when we want to. We concentrate on those things that we think are important. But it is possible for us to see different things as important at different times. And those things that you can't carry up here, that's why you got pencils, paper, now tape recorders, and all of these things that to work as your aid. So this was the next step. I went around to black churches and places. Listen, come and support. They're getting ready to put tuition into your children. I know our community is poor. People said to me, well, I heard they ain't teaching nothing up there anyhow. They ain't learning nothing. And, well, ain't nobody paid for no education for me. I come from down south, and I never had a chance to get no education. I don't understand why you got to pay nothing for them. Now, not all people, but if one of us say that, that's one too many. I had others who said, well, I paid my father and mother. They sweated and they had to pay $10,000 a year for my education. And therefore, I don't see why anybody else should get it for free. This rugged individualism garbage. The system don't play that with us. Even only our do ourselves. So the end result, as you know, tuition came. But it wasn't enough to stem the tide. Now, then came the struggle in the 60s of young blacks saying, you ain't saying nothing in these campuses that has anything to do with me. I am being whited out in the world. And the end result of that, all we have to do is look at Judge Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill to see what miseducation will do for you. Because I didn't do that to them. And as I told you before, he's a fifth cousin of mine, but I ain't bragging about it. But in any event, ultimately, they got the tuition. Did the bad mouthing stop? Because we didn't. Nobody found a way to do this, and all of us would disappear. Now comes the question of content. We are tired of Epaminondas stepping in all of the pies. We are tired of Step and Fetch It and Mantan Molan. We're tired of Al Jolson and Eddie Cantor and Georgia Jessel and all of these other folks singing Mammy with burnt cork, as they call corking up, putting on the cork, to play horrible, distorted caricatures of black folk. When Jeffries or I or anybody else says this, we are now accused of anti-Semitism. But as this lady says, you can call me anything you want. You still have not answered the question. The issue before us was the role that Hollywood and the collusion between Hollywood and organized crime to the degradation of black folk. How dare you say that? I ain't heard nobody yet say, and maybe some of y'all heard, no, they didn't do that. No, there was no blackface comedians in Hollywood. I ain't heard nobody say that. I ain't heard nobody yet say he lied. They call him names, this, that, and the other. Dr. Shasta McIntyre, you might have seen it, a week after this broke, did a 2-part series in the City Sun that gave the whole historical background of the role, or a good part of it, what you can do in 2 sessions, of the role that the Sephardim played in the slave trade. This is no damn secret. But the assumption of these jackals is, because they're not making this for white folks, they already know where white people are, is that we don't read and that we don't know the history. And we will have these stupid, meaningless arguments about should I support the brother. If you can't support him or her, keep your damn mouth shut. Let me say to you parenthetically, I remember when I was a young man, teenager, I had a job working as a filling station, which I wiped the windshield off and pumped the gas. It was a good job. I got $5 a week, which is a hell of a lot of money. For some reason, my daddy didn't make too. And one day, a salesman, a traveling salesman, came up, parked up, and he said to me, boy, fill it up, clean the windshield, which I would have done automatically anyway. How many gallons? No, he said, put 10 gallons in. And so I proceeded to put, and I started to wipe the car. This is hot. This is in the South. This is in Florida, so it's hot. He was talking to the boss inside, who was sitting at the desk. You could see right out by the pump, which was like no more than from here to where this lady is sitting in front. So the guy, my boss, started asking this guy, you know, how far you come? You know, making conversation, how far you going? He was a Curtis salesman. That is, he sold stuff like Butterfinger, Baby Ruth, and all them kind of candies. And he had a whole bunch of his samples, you know, candy, packets of candy in his car. Most of them was a little smaller piece that he used as promotional stuff in stores. So he's looking, and he said to the boss as I walked away, he said, I can't talk any longer. He said, because I got the niggas out there in my car, and I got candy, and you know the whole niggas will steal. He's talking to the boss like this. I'm coming in to tell him how much the gas was. The man is standing like there, the boss is here, and I'm here. When he walked out, he paid the boss, and I said to him, I said, what the hell was the matter with that man? Why the hell would he say anything like that? He says, what? I said, you heard him. He said, I didn't hear anything. Even on a level like that, I didn't hear nothing. I quit. But you follow the point instinctively. His instinct was what? To protect his brother. I didn't hear nothing. And he didn't even have to bat an eye to say this. Now you take that to its logical conclusion. There is not one Jewish scholar, in view of what you said earlier, there's not one Jewish scholar, only a couple, William Katz, but by and large, even the ones that wrote the books that we use to back up our arguments will not come forth and stand up and call a press conference and say Dr. Leonard Jeffries told the truth. Even though they know this is true. And even though they know that all the furor is much ado about nothing. The issue as far as they're concerned is their credibility or their standing with their people. And if their people make fools of themselves, so be it. If Jeffries or everybody in this room goes down to destruction undeservedly, so be that too. And yet we have black folks who wouldn't even have them damn stupid microphones in front of them if it hadn't been for the struggle out there. Now I am in the private sector, like them ladies on them news shows that got them grins painted on their faces. They can be described, yes, this morning in China, 50,000 people died in this earthquake. What the hell is funny about earthquake? Everything is upbeat. And the controversial Dr. Leonard Jeffries, what makes him, anytime you take a position contrary to what these people want you to take, immediately you are labeled controversial. And I've heard black folks, yeah, he's controversial. I say, what does that mean, huh? Contra what? Is the truth controversial? The truth by definition is the truth. It is a fact. Now, while I was in Jeffries' office on Friday, his secretary of 20 years, Mills, kept coming in because they're supposed to protect him. People are calling from Stockholm, Sweden. You heard me. So I'm going to give you all the truth. You ain't going to get that in your tomorrow's paper tomorrow in New York or the Newark Star Ledger. Is that what it is? Okay, good. Yeah. But we have our version of it, right? You ain't going to get that tomorrow. They would like him to come. Would he be available to come to speak in Stockholm? All expenses paid with a stipend. Name your price. Uh-huh. From The Hague in Holland, Zaire, Ghana, or information. Where can we find certain things, etc. While I was there Friday afternoon, a gentleman by the name of Vladimir Ilyich Guzman, who is the correspondent for TASS, came in and asked for an interview, which was granted. A gentleman from France Press waited for an hour and a half. Now let me share something else with y'all. If you're bored, go home. No, I'm glad. I thought you'd never say that. If I sit down, I can't talk. You know black folks can't sit and do two things at one time. Not when you get old. You're getting beside yourself, boy. I'm going to have to, don't start smelling your piss now. They wanted to sit, and Jeff asked me to sit in with us. A brother, quote unquote, from Time magazine, because we're taping it, he's taping everything now, called, and he wanted Jeffers, could he sit down for an hour interview with him? Because he, and Jeffers says, why should I talk to you? Because I want to tell your story in a positive manner. And Jeff said, you're going to tell my story in a positive manner? Yes. Are you the managing editor of Time magazine? This is Friday. No. Are you the executive editor? No. Do you have any kind of powerful position in Time Inc.? No, but I am a very well-respected journalist. And Jeff says, well, okay, then explain to me how you, with no clout, are going to guarantee me that you're going to give an hour interview and you're going to go and write a positive interview with me after your publication has smeared me and called me everything but a child of God over a month ago. Now, you really want me to believe that the managers of Time is going to sit still for you to come back and call them a liar? Is that about to happen, y'all? No. No. And this man spent 20 minutes, I sat there, trying to convince him, to talk. And he said, listen, brother, he says, we did that for this dude that came down from Cambridge. What was the institution? Who said that? Who said Harvard? Yes. Yeah, where did Anita Hill graduate from? Where did Clarence Thomas graduate from? Be careful you don't leave your minds in exchange for them piece of paper and them people's institutions. All right? Now, watch the Tuesday after the Board of Higher Education met to agree they couldn't do nothing, and they knew it. The lawyers probably told them, hey, you got to make them look good as jackals at you. But if you go this way with this man, he's got a suit. Now listen to this. Didn't the federal court, just before this happened, when Michael Levin took his case to the court, what did the court say, class? Right? And you can't do that back. Now, the same issue is with Jeffries. So now tell me, are they really going to come up there and take the position to go down the same primrose path again after the court? No. Because if the court ruled differently in Jeffries' case, if he goes there, then that's overt, obvious racism. No, that's not that they're not racist, but they have to have a little more style than that, because then Moses and Mosetta would be out there in the streets tearing up things and crazy and acting crazy. Halston says, I'd like to fire him. But this Harlem community will not permit it. If that ain't black power, I don't know what it is. So the white folks is making him crawl. That's what this is about. Okay, I can't get him, but if you don't disassociate yourself from that nigga, your butt is gone. Because we gave you the job, and we can ungive it to you. This is nothing new either in our history, is it? We've had the folks in slavery time who would go down and tell the master what was happening for a crust of bread. And people like Halston, we don't have to worry about them. They can always make a living off the pennies they steal off of dead men's eyes. But they don't have nothing to see we respect after. So this boy comes down on the day that Jeff's father died. Now, there used to be things that we didn't do. He was giving a lecture at Baruch College the day that his father died. Told the young man, he came to lunch, said, I don't have no time. I'm dedicating this to my father, this lecture, and I have to start preparing my family to take care of the bereavement of my family. However, since he came down here, they took it. He followed them around for 2 days. And at the end, he gave Marion Mills, his secretary, an instruction, because he said, we want to know your version of the curriculum inclusion here, your side by same shit. And I put this on, and look, I had talked to you now, because I'm this, but have Miss Mills give you all the material, and you take that back. At some later date, you can set up something, and we can talk. Now, I have to take this to them, because we need to look at these things. This is the only way we have of getting news that we know out there. I don't have access to 11 o'clock news. So what happened? You give them that, but that's not what Dershowitz wants. And I can prove that the dude is a snake. And again, I apologize to Snake. The boy goes back, and I use the phrase deliberately to Cambridge. I shouldn't insult the boy. The Negro goes back, and I guess when he got back there, Dr. Allen Dershowitz says, where is the smoking gun? And the boy had to say, well, I don't have. What do you mean? Well, I didn't have none. Well, I did the interview, and he called Henry Louis Gates a faggot punk. And then his bodyguard got upset and came and attacked me and took the tape and took the thing out and ran me out of there. Now, what was his next step? As I said earlier, was his next step to go to the nearest policeman that he saw on the street? No. Did he hail down a prowl car? No. Did he call the precinct? No. Did he talk to anybody that could help him get stuff? No. He gets back, he goes all the way back to Cambridge, all the way almost across New York, the southern end of New York, across the whole state of Connecticut, the other end of Massachusetts, which ain't that big. He don't stop to no police precinct and none of the places in between, even when he gets back home to Cambridge. He don't even go to the Cambridge police force. He goes and reports to Massa. And I guess when Massa says, where is the tape? And he says, they took it from me. Now, does Massa call the Cambridge police? No. What does Massa do? He calls a press conference. Now, come on, good people in here. I know we's a dumb people, but are we that dumb to buy that? Right? He ain't called, Dershowitz ain't called New York yet. City say, hey, we got to get, no. Now, what do the jackals do? The next day they are saying, Jeffries does it again. Not Jeffries is accused. Now, mind you, the guy don't say Jeffries attacked him. His bodyguard attacks him. By that statement, he's calling Jeffries a damn fool. Because Jeffries will sit there with a man with a tape recorder in front of him, taping just like this man is taping me. And he sees this. And I'm going to stand up here and be stupid enough to make some statement after I know they're after me that somebody can use to bang me across the head. Does that make any sense? No. And not only that, Jefferson is so dumb he don't know he's making a compromising statement. One of his bodyguards has to say, give me that tape here. Bam, boom, boom, poof, wow. But again, they went fool, as my grandma would say. It's gotten to the place that even the average white person in the street in New York say, what is this? Ain't there nothing else in the news besides Jefferson? What is it? Everything, right? In other words, it's a bad case of overkill. Right? So now, this is the thing. Now, let me throw another scenario at you, because again, I got this long memory, which I can't help having. And as I said, I hope the seatbelts are buckled, because it might be a long night. And at least I want to tie in what we got. Remember the Tawana Brawley case?
Yes.
Think back to this yo-yo who held a press conference with all these folks that says, I have the tape recording where Sharpton and Maddox and Mason sat down and called this, and with Tawana Brawley and framed up how they were going to pay. Y'all remember that? And and did the press buy it? The jackals buy it? Yeah, tape, the smoking gun tape is going to be for this. Nobody even bothered to check. Everybody that knew this dude, the black community, knew he was a nut. Yeah, knew he was a nut. But if you would have gone up and said, hey, this guy, hey, right? They needed that, right? So what happened? You remember that? So they hold a press conference. And the dude comes with the tape, and he's waving the damn tape. Say that again, please. Nothing on the tape. Did they stop? No. They just shifted gears. They went to, now this ain't something I said. Y'all know this. This is last year. No shame, as my grandma said, Lord, these your white folks ain't got no shame. She right, you know, y'all. And this is a woman that had no education at all. As I told you, I taught her reading and writing when she was 91 years old. But a brilliant lady. She knew the system because she started out the first 10 years of her life in slavery. Nobody could tell her what these people was. She knew it and passed it on. You need to understand that so that we can give some kind of legacy to that child. You see? Now, when the dude shows this, they just forgot about this. They didn't stop calling Al Sharpton, Tawana Brawley liars, right? Remember I tell you about tying thing analytics. Now, let me skip ahead, because I know all of y'all got that wood burning, but at least you're thinking. And I don't want to load you too much, because, you know, you might not come back again. And I need y'all. But I like to tie these things up so we can see what I'm talking about is not even racism. I'm talking about absurd arrogance. Something beyond racism. It's one thing that you hate me. I understand that. But when you go to these absurd kind of stupid things, it's one thing to hate me, but for God's sake, don't call me dumb. I'm very particular toward my intelligence. And when you do stuff like this, you're calling all of us a dumb people that cannot think and don't have no remembrance. And I'll lay on the wire that, but I'm going to tie this next point up. Here comes Professor Anita Hill, a lady, and I understand the bottom language of my people, and you quote me. I don't say nothing. I ain't going to take your tape recorder back and have somebody beat you up. And if anybody in this room have watched those things, and it's true, as I say, coming out of the South and understanding us with all our sins and whatnot, the bottom line, what this lady has, is she don't like herself. And what she doesn't like about herself, she don't like her complexion. Watch the lady. Two things told me this. When you are eaten up with self-hatred, you are in a poor row for stumps. And when you don't respect yourself, because there ain't a damn thing that none of us can do about our Africanness. A lot of us try. Put all the jerry curls you want in there. Don't get wet. Going straight home to Mother Africa, where it belongs. And you know I'm always saying, I don't care how much bleach you use and how much skin lightener, you go to put on one of them dresses off the rack, if the size say 18, you better get you a size 22. Otherwise, it ain't going to come down over your behind. European women used to spend good money to buy pads to put so it make it look like they have some curve to their behind. We're born with it. And ain't nothing going to change that. Of course, you could always have an operation, cut yourself across here and peel off some of the scatterpigeon stuff and flatten it out. But then you run the risk, since we got all this melanin, you might get keloids. So it looked like you got a hinge back there. It costs a lot, it's a lot of effort, time to try to be what you ain't. Right? Now, part of what these folks thought, and I can prove this by their own saying, don't say you're crazy. They really thought that if they dot all the I's, cross all the T's, and didn't sound like I worked like hell to sound, that they would become honorary Europeans. How do I know this? Here's the lady who says, he sexually harassed me. And as I said to the brother the other night, I've lived African all my life. It wasn't always smart, but that's what it is. And one of the first things I learned was that the average sister can put a brother in his place in a minute if she don't want his attention. There are 50 million ways that y'all got of doing that without even calling him a motherfucker. You know, just throw that hand akimbo in a certain thing. You get the message. Body language. And don't call me a liar, because I can stand here until tomorrow morning and give you example after concrete example. So we don't never have to go. When you talk about sexual harassment, that's European stuff. That ain't us. Now, at least a sister demands that the dude put his hands on her in some kind of way. And man, I watch these ladies. When y'all curl your lip up and go like this, man, it'll freeze a stone. Don't come back for seconds, because you're in big trouble. Now, anybody in this room don't know that, better go take some African lessons. Am I lying, y'all? All right? Because sisters ain't never had nobody to protect their interests. Ain't nobody ever went out and formed no lynch mob because somebody was accused of raping you. Now, he sexually harasses her, tells her about the, and mind you, Europeans love this because they got this prick envy of African men anyway.
Long John.
Yes, you got it, Long John Silver, and I got this, that, and the other. And everybody gets titillated because that's the way they think. And if you don't believe me, you go down 8th Avenue in New York City right now, and you watch all them Johns cruising, trying to pick up prostitutes. The Johns is all white, and some of them ladies, they really look so raunchy that you wouldn't even want to walk on the same side of it. Don't bother them. And you look at the license plate, the suburbs of New Jersey, Long Island. Don't take my word for it. Damn it, go look. To the extent that Eastern Parkway, before they tore it up, was so terrible even that respectable women coming home from work, obviously coming home from work, and these yo-yos would be riding along on the service road. You know how many times we kick white men's behind for this? Following a woman right up to her door. Excuse me a minute. I hate to do this to y'all, but I'm going to do it anyway. This is a book called The Hole in the Sheet. I only got one copy left, so don't ever run it once. So the smart dude gets here first. A modern woman looks at Orthodox and Hasidic Judaism. The Hasidics, the people, those are the folks that we're having this confrontation with on Crown Heights, right? The title is The Hole in the Sheet. Anybody know what that refers to? Yes.
That's when they have sex and they have to put a hole in the sheet when the woman's driving the money.
Say it so everybody can hear you. We all know what sex is. We got here from sex. Because I don't want them to say I said it. Please say it.
I can't hear you, sir. I can't hear you.
Yeah, come up here and do your thing through this thing here. And I will reread it so y'all can hear it. Please. Thank you. Your name, brother?
Martin.
All right, Brother Martin, will you please tell them folks what you just shared with me? Come here to the mic, man.
A couple of my former Jewish friends informed me that when a Jewish relationship, when the husband wants to make love and his wife, on her time of the month, he has to take a sheet, put a hole in the sheet, and insert his penis through the hole and then make love to his wife, because he can't touch her physically. So I guess they came up with that to get around, you know, how
Yes.
they always do it. They get around
Thank you.
the rule.
Thank you, Brother Martin. Give him a hand. Did y'all clear what the man said? Now watch the hypocrisy. Does this tie in what I just said about the prostitutes and who use them? Look at the hypocrisy. The law says, so you see, it didn't start with me and Jeffries and us. You understand? The culture dies hard. You know, you got to stomp on it. And just like they have their cultural thing, so do we have ours. And cultural different whatnot. What did he say? Here's the hypocrisy. In the Orthodox of his faith, the woman is unclean during her menstrual cycle. Say that. Who said that? Would you say that a little louder, please, ma'am? You see what I said about different cultures? I knew somebody was going to say that. Do you hear what the sister say? Why touch her? Now, you anticipated my next statement. In our culture, we do not normally touch the woman, period, during that time. We consider that being nasty. Now, I'm not saying some of us don't do that because we learn a lot of European bad habits. But culturally. But now here is the religion. The religion interdicts any kind of physical intercourse. And let me just take it one step further. She is not even supposed to sit on the bed where he or another man sits at that period. All right? But yet, the contradiction, he cannot even bother to leave her alone for whatever time the cycle takes. So he works himself around it, puts the sheet around her, a hole down where the vagina is, and then inserts it through the sheet. Now, let me ask you a question. If he puts his penis through the sheet and inserts it into the wife's vagina, has he not made physical contact with her? Is his penis made of a different kind of protoplasm than the rest of his body? Well, is it? No. So what is this ritual about? Hypocrisy. Trying to eat your cake and have it too. Now, if we can look at people's culture, how they treat themselves. I heard your whoever's thing is this, Boxman on. That will tell you what we can expect. But again, like my grandma said, you have to know these things. Let me just, and this lady was a former Hasidic Jew. And it's a story when thieves fall out. She had to get out. And she talks about, she ain't black, she ain't Linda Jeffries. And nobody, as far as I know, has yet called her anti-Semitic. And here's what she said. In the long night, chapter 11, epilogue. I knew I had to write this book after I went to my mother's funeral. It was the first time in more than 20 years that I attended an Orthodox Jewish ceremony in the community where I grew up. Can y'all hear me in the back? After I broke away to work as a journalist, I didn't want to come back. Every now and then, there would be family visits to my parents. I never attended services. I had forgotten what it was like. But my mother died, and I went home for the funeral. Suddenly, I was back again, trapped in the past, being treated like a little girl, a helpless woman, and a person with no rights and no standing in male society. Now, of course, I know I'm going to be known as a professor of hate for this, but, right? On a damp, cold, and bleak January day, we attended the funeral service in the lofty marble-floored hall at the Jewish cemetery. I held my father's arm to support him, a pale, shaken man of 80 whose wife had always done everything for him. An official came over to steer me across the room to where the women sat at one side. I must sit over there. I could not stay on this side with the men. A friend of my father sat with him on the bench. This is the daughter, but she can't sit next and comfort her father. Tell me you people ain't crazy. The ceremony began after the minister arrived. He stood at the front facing the group of elderly men and women, many of whom I had known since childhood. The official ushered my father and my brother to stand in front. I was allowed to stand to one side. My mother's only sister stood beside me. The official even beckoned my husband to stand in front by the minister, though he's not Jewish. But as a man, his status was clear. Leonard Jeffries would have been preferable to a woman. The service was solemn but brief. The minister extolled my mother as an exemplary wife and mother, a devoted member of the synagogue, ladies' guild, a tireless community worker and volunteer. The coffin covered by a black cloth stood in front of us. The prayers ended, the doors behind opened. With the help of the family, the coffin on its trolley was pushed out into the frigid air, a long path across a road and past the expanse of marble gravestones which covered the once rolling green acres of fields. Behind came the men of the community, and far behind the women dutifully hanging back. At the graveside there were more prayers. Then the coffin was lowered into its hole. The ministers took the spade and shoveled a handful of earth on top. My brother and father followed him. Other men in the community did the same. I moved forward calmly, took the spade, and threw some earth onto the coffin. No other woman moved from her place. Now this lady had to get outside. Even if it begins, right? We drove back to the house. For a week, we observed the traditional mourning, sitting on special chairs, not going out, waiting for friends to visit, attending the morning and evening prayer services. The first evening that the prayers began, my brother tried to herd the women out into the hall. I was horrified. Here was a mourning ceremony for a woman. Here were many of her friends, also women. Here was her sister, a woman in her 70s. And here was her only daughter, sent outside as if we were unworthy of participation in prayers. I refuse to stay in the hall, I said firmly. The women can stand in the back of the room. There were a few mumbles, but I knew that it was quite permissible for women to be in the room. They were not allowed to pray or sing aloud, nor could they lead the services, but they could be present, like zombies. The women said nothing, but filed in and squeezed into the back of the room. The men chanted and muttered their way through the evening prayers and the special mourners' invocations. The rest of the week was like watching a replay of the years of my past. Friends I remembered as teenagers came to call with their teenage children. Their parents who remembered me as a child came to reminisce. The warm, enveloping friendliness had not changed, nor had the undertones of craziness. I ain't saying that, she did. One woman prayed in the hall, not believing she had the right to stand in the back of the room. Another arrived wearing a wig, long sleeves, and a high-collared blouse, placing her chair conspicuously away from the others, lest she might touch somebody else. They asked about my husband and my children. I replied, I was a wife and a mother. That was acceptable. I, as a person, an individual, a journalist, did not exist. Nor did I exist as a person when they counted for the minyan, the 10 men necessary before prayers can be recited. As the week passed, the weather became colder. One morning there were only 9 men for the prayers. Of course I was there, since I came over early every morning from my cousin's where I was staying. My brother, agitated and angry that there was no minyan, told me to call several of my father's friends to round up the required number. As I made the telephone call to these old men, I felt as if I was an actor in a bizarre movie. And God knows black folks know about bizarre movies. There were 10 people in the house, but one of them happened to be a woman. And I did not exist. I had to persuade an elderly man to come out on this bitter cold morning because he was a real person and counted as one to make up the 10 required. Once again, I had become a non-person. The Shabbos provided new reminders of the past. I reverted to my role of Shabbos Goy, a person who, like a non-Jew, carries out the duties that the ultra-Orthodox won't perform on the Sabbath. I think that's enough to give you sense. This is the culture that we're coming up against. This is the culture that will create funny things like holes in sheets to deny that what they're doing is something. This is the culture that says women are nothing, children are nothing, everything toward the male. And the victims themselves, like a lot of us, many of them ultimately end up participating in their own victimization. What did you say about the person speaking earlier today about how come what Jeffrey's is doing to themselves and whatnot? Another example. I see everybody's quiet. Think about it. This is why we need to study. You can't, if you don't study people, I know it's hard. It's hard enough to know who we are, but you have to spend that time because what you don't know can hurt you. This now, if you understood just this little bit, you should now be clear as to why in the community where I live in Brooklyn, when this Rebbe ran up in the car and killed this little 7-year-old black child and seriously wounded the other, and what was their first instinct? Leave. Who said that? In other words, damn, there's a human being down there. There is, you see, now we say, my God, how could you do that to a child? With our compassion and culture, we're right. But that was no child lying there. Their first thing is what? My thing said, get him out, and then, now, how the hell did they get this man out? Within 2 days, his butt was in Israel. And we have not been able to extradite him yet. Now, given this kind of hardball, and this is the whole point of this, I don't mind what you do in your culture if it don't affect me and us and ours. But what this should tell us, just that little bit, what this woman had to run, there's a whole book of what and it wasn't easy for her to get out of that, you know. Because she said it took her 20 years to learn how to respect a man, to learn how to love a man. She says that when she first got out there, every day she had a different man. Looking, not love, emotion, just anything. She wanted to do everything that was the opposite of what they had forced her into. And at some point she realized down the road, in the hatred and anger that I have for what the men in my own cult did to me, I was not only destroying other males who had nothing to do with this, but I was ultimately doing what? Destroying myself. Now, this ain't what Jeff said or what I said. This book never got very popular. The miracle is that it got published. Now, tie this into the ladies and Anita Hill. This man never touched her, according to her. Even after the thing, as she would call him, just calling the check base, having you call me, God, 18 calls, whatever. How you doing there? And then he went and married that Caucasian lady. And Anita Hill realized, and it's not that she realized that all my plans is over. She had decided to hitch her wagon to Star, because they were birds of a feather. I want to see what this man got and go all this way. Now, how do I know that my cousin was this way? My uncle, what brought it home was what he himself said. When they brought his African butt back to make a show out of him, to make a blackface clown in blackface and to titillate all of America in this show, at that point he realized that it had all been for nothing. And when I saw them curls go in his mouth, and I said, oh, Lord, he doesn't come home now. Because he's mad. What did he say? But not only he started off by saying, what did he say? You have destroyed everything that has taken me 43 years of my life to build. You took it all away. And I'm the uppity nigger, and this is nothing but a high-tech lynching. I said, well, you finally came home.
Take that serious, though.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Listen to me. Listen to me. And I don't even want to get into, but if it were not serious, the germ there, why use it? If he was not aware of the traditional confrontation in the society, he used it as a means of getting the empathy from us. But how the hell did he know it would work if the history hadn't been there? Y'all follow what I'm saying? If the history hadn't been there, he could not have used it. He had to use something else. So even in that, he had to still reach back and get something out of his own culture to try to reach out, to try to touch Moses and Mosetta with. So whether he should have gotten an Academy Award, no question, both of them acted. The fact remains that he had no other option, because he was really saying to his people, H-E-L-P, y'all. He had nothing else left. They had stripped him of everything. He even said, well, listen, Judge, I don't want to unduly bore you or embarrass you, but the lady has made certain several charges. You know I supported you. But actually, did you stick your dick through that hole in the sheet? I mean, we have to know. Come on now. And then you watch all them Caucasian feminist ladies. Yes, we must support our sister. And I'm looking at Anita Hill, African, beautiful black satin skin, and I'm looking at these pale-faced ladies with no color in their skin, and all of them, and they're coming, yes, and we have to get this where we must support our sister. She was harassed and sexually harassed. 3 weeks before this happened, a Jamaican sister in Brooklyn, at a trial, these St. John preppers abused her, raped her, did what they wanted with her. And what did the judge? The judge said, hey, they ain't done nothing. Whatever they did might have been desperate for the criminal. Did you hear any of them ladies get up in arms and say, any word? I ain't said it. Not one word. Tawana Brawley said she was raped in Manhattan. She lied. Even after the dude come with a blank tape. Now you know where I'm going from? Now this is not ancient history, children. This is now. This is now. Use your mind. And you're going to tell me that these yo-yos are really up there looking out for us to do each other in, and Jeffries is the criminal. We have been accused as though here are all of these ungrateful black folks, colored folks, that the Jews have had this long tradition of helping and reaching a hand down to. And we have fought the civil rights fight together. And how have you repaid me for my help and my support? You ended up by yelling Black Power symbols and kicking me out. Anti-Semitism. We got to look at that history, and part of what Jeff was saying about the movement is a part of it, not the whole part of it. You see, the relationship between African folks here and Jewish folks didn't start in the 1960s. As we see from this book here, very well, very well. None of your business. You're always doing that to me. You don't bring out nothing until it be time, boy. Fruit don't come on the tree till it's time. Smell it, y'all. Yes, the one guy can still walk around. I showed this out earlier. How many of you are familiar with this book? Yes. this Inquisition. This book is full of, these are all instruments of torture and murder and killing that European cultures use to kill their own people long before the African slave trade started. Among the items that's displayed in here is I can't look at it because I don't have the time. Here we are. Remember we talked about holding the sheet? You don't have to, but this is a chastity belt. I'm sure you've all heard of it. Right? This is a metal belt, wraps around your waist, and then this hinge part here, the woman of course, comes up in your crotch and latches here. There's a small orifice in back for you to do number 2, and a little slit in the front in the smaller shape of your vagina for you to do number 1. Whenever the man of the house, who's the Lord, was going off on a trip to battle, which they was always doing because they're always fighting, yes ma'am, the wife would be called in, or the women of the house, if they're the daughters, and they have these things custom tailored, right? You didn't have no mass production back then. This was a big profession, making chastity belts. And they had to be melted on the waist, and they'd come in and they'd fit each woman, or female, and that'd put on. Now, the dude may be going off to the Crusades, or he may be going off following Christopher Columbus.
That was so she wouldn't have sex.
I'm afraid so, ma'am. I guess they didn't trust the ladies. I didn't make these. Now, bear in mind, children, we the savages. You don't find no African culture or no other kind of culture in the world where this kind of thing comes. See, culture comes from here, right? Now, I beg your pardon. What'd you say? What'd you say, sweetheart? I don't know if the word wash was in their vocabulary at that time. I can tell you that the term SOAP was not. The answer to your question is you didn't. The best she might do is, because you can't get up here. I told you it was a long night. I didn't say to y'all buckle your chastity belt. I said buckle your seat belt. All right? Now, imagine if this lady gets a case of diarrhea. But you see, nobody smelt anybody because they all smell. And if any of you ever been a soldier and stayed out, say, for 2 or 3 months in the field without having access to bath water, you don't smell the person next to you. But once you get a pass, and you get a pass to get a 2-day pass to come into town, and you're walking down the street, and all of a sudden you look, and ain't nobody on the street, and you're bopping you, and people are running like this, going, didn't you say, I wonder what's the matter with them people? Is they crazy? You're talking about a people in Europe at that time that even the aristocracy only took a bath once a year at Christmas time. And what they would do, they would come into the great hall. See, that's why y'all got crazy scholars like me, the professors of hate. Yeah. And listen to me. They had a big bathtub. The house didn't even have no damn windows. We talk about bathtubs. They would get a big tub of stone in the middle. And at the annual Christmas thing, they would come and sing hymn, and all the servants would come in. And they would bring water from wherever they heated it from home, and they would slosh the water over master and missus and all the head of the house all together, and they wash it. And then when they finished, they didn't throw that water out. Whichever servants then, house servants wanted to take a bath, then they would get in and use the same water and consider it an honor to share the water with master and missus. Haven't you ever heard of the custom of the droit de seigneur, the seigneur's right, which meant that the lord of the manor had the right and was expected that on any of his vassals, the peasants' wedding night, before the man had sex with his wife, the lord of the manor slept with her. He had to check it out first. And the culture was such that if the lord of the manor looked and said, my God, I don't want that, the peasant said, what the hell's wrong with my wife? Did I do something wrong, boss? Why you don't want to sleep it up? Yeah, well, that's why they don't want no curriculum of correction. But that's why we got places like this. You come with the patient, we'll give it to you, and it's all documented. Let me show you something called a head crusher. This is called a cat's paw. The slang name for it is a Spanish tickler. And what they would do, they would hang you as in this position by a cord, and the guy would take these cords and he would scrape up and down, just cut your back with it in a row, just open it up like this, right? And cut you to any depth they wanted to. No, we the savages. Savage people don't behave like that. These are the civilized folks. Right? Here we have the pendulum. Tied you on this with a rack, tied your hands up, turned it like this. You see his hands behind his back, pulled you to whatever thing. Then they had another thing where they would take sharp spikes on the floor and hold you right up and just have the tip of your toes touching those spikes. And they would pull or lower the rope to whatever degree of pain they wanted to administer to you. Thumb screws. The name is obvious. Put your thumb in there and screw them down. Again, you see how, listen, high tech. They could adjust the pressure on these things to any degree they wanted. Right? A lot of thought went into this shit, man. All right, this is the rack. They could make you taller or shorter, as the occasion demanded. They wanted to make you shorter, they turn one thing, and it stretched you. They want to make you shorter, well, they could stretch this way or chop out a piece, whichever was most convenient. Anti-Semitism, hell. This is the granddaddy of all electric chairs. They anticipated the electric chair by about 500 years. This is, you can see the outline, like the straps and the whole thing. The only thing was that once you sat in this, they didn't have to pull down no lever for the juice. The pain, of course, with the construction itself was instantaneous. Iron gag. That's right. And what they would do with this, there's a piece in here that sticks in here in your mouth. This went around your mouth, back like this, in your mouth and your nostrils. And I could let you breathe a little bit, or a lot, or intermittently, or not at all. I could torture you. Now the push was, they wasn't trying to get no information, tell me what you know. This was a process of killing. All they wanted to do, of course, was prolong the pleasure of titillation. And the master would say, okay, ease it up a little bit. How'd that feel? Okay, tighten it up a little bit more. Let's see, one more round with some sort, right? Here. This is called the heretic's fork. This stuck under your, see that? Right up in here. And if you had the wrong religion, or you got caught with the wrong Bible, now they did this to you for the good of your soul. You died, but it guaranteed that you went to heaven. They call this an auto da fe, right, an act of faith. Pole arm for jailers, noise makers. And what these would do, you put them around and they could make you scream, right, with a noise, right? Necklaces for ne'er-do-well. If you didn't have no job, they didn't permit unemployment in those days. If you were unemployed, it was your fault. And therefore, you had to be punished for not having a job. Well, oh yeah, well, if you don't laugh with gallows humor, what else can you do? We need, because this, and think about it. Huh? And you carry this. All right, you ain't got no job, MF. I know you ain't got none because you carrying the badge of unemployment. Dice and all these things, and they tinkle as you walk. Bing-a-ling-a-ling, they can hear you 4 blocks away. And you better not take it off. Huh? A barrel pillory. What'd you say? Now, that's the best turn. Yes, ma'am. This, you open this up and they put it, see it sits around there? And this cuts in your neck. You got to wear this thing for as long as they tell you.
They call that the dark age.
This dark ages, they always, dark is white, thank you. This is a skull splitter. They put that around your skull, it's self-explanatory, and just tighten it. And if your skull can land, I know they say that African folks have hard heads. And this is the last one I'll titillate you with. This is a head crusher. This, of course, unscrews, open up. The cap goes down this way. This goes under here. And like with a corkscrew that you, when you want to get it in to get the cork out, they just screw. And as you applied each turn, the pain became more and more excruciating. Now, why do I take the kind of words? I told you have to look at these things holistically. Bear in mind that these things were being done by Europeans to Europeans 1,000 years before they ever knew I had any knowledge of us, or where their knowledge of us was like superstition. Now, and to bring it to today, if this is what you will do, if this is the heritage you have to your own people, what would you do to me? No worse, right? And if I can identify you by this, makes it easy, doesn't it? All I have to do is put you beyond the pale. Now, when we look at it and come down, we can see that there is a pattern of this, a pattern of this kind of audacious cruelty. No other culture do I know of have ever produced these kinds of things. And if they had, you know damn well that they would have made sure they were out there. Now remember I said earlier, and all this is a prayer, but they're talking that the things we're trying to do, they call this feel-good history. Feel-good history. The fact that you hide this, what do you call that? The history that we have been subjected to and miseducated by is feel-good history for European folks. To guarantee that you get a job, oh, that's terrible, that's affirmative action. But slavery was affirmative action for white people. Jim Crow was affirmative action for white people. Not having access to certain craft jobs, railways, carpenters, electrical work was affirmative action for white people. Automatically barring blacks from police departments, fire departments, sanitation departments, which most cities at one time or another did, was affirmative action for who? White people. Education, secondary and third and fourth class or none, was considered academic affirmative action for white people. The movies then was a continuation of an entertainment system which was structured and followed the lines of feel-good history for white people. Is that clear? Now what that feel-good history meant, that they needed to be constantly faced with what they believed to be African inferiority, which means they had very thin egos. The Eastern European Jews coming here, and ironically coming here as an oppressed people, they didn't come here looking for adventure, children, they came here running. Aaron Lopez, this gentleman here, which of course started all the problem the Chrysler did FS, Aaron Lopez was, let me read what he was, so y'all don't say I'm making it up. And I'm capable of making things up, don't get me wrong, if it'll help liberation. I don't have no problem with lying. Lying is just as a tool, use it well. Here, chapter 15, Aaron and Empire. As the 1770s progressed, the name of Aaron Lopez became known throughout the trading centers of the Western world. Still a young man, barely 40, the former Portuguese fugitive was rapidly mounting to the summit of his career. So a whole lot of these names you see that you think are Spanish, Pacheco, Seixas, Guzman, all of these. Guzman started out as German being Gutmann. All of these were either Sephardic or Portuguese Jews. When Lynn Jeffries talked about the Spanish grandees and the Sephardim, Sepharda was the ancient Hebrew name for Spain. And all it does was to distinguish that group of Spanish and Portuguese Jews, the Jews from the Iberian community, from the Ashkenazis or the others. And they went through a different history. Now, how do we understand this? All of the Jews who became famous in Hollywood came from within 500 miles of each other in Europe. They were all belonging to the category of what is known as the Russian Jewry, Eastern European Jewry, who had been traditionally looked down, the Litvaks as they were called, Lithuanians. And they were looked down upon the Western or Ashkenazim or Sephardim as being inferior. What the lady just said prepared the groundwork. Which meant German Jews considered themselves integrated. This is where Reform Judaism started in Germany, where they decided to change it around to be more like their Germans. They brought the organ into the synagogue. They brought music into the synagogue. They stopped doing certain things of the Orthodox ritual that they felt would single them out from the Germans. You understand? You have to look at, when you talk about Holocaust, again, you got to look at the background. As my grandma said, you got to know them things, where it comes from. Now, in our time, the group of Jewry that lost the largest amount of people to the Holocaust were the German Jews. And I think there's a lesson there for African folks, because the German Jews were the most assimilated Jews of all the European Jews. And they considered themselves, for the most part, Germans, like a certain other group who I don't want to name because I don't want to embarrass nobody. A lot of them considered themselves Americans. I don't have nothing to do with Africa. I didn't mean to say that. I'm an American. And the German Jews ultimately set themselves up. A lot of them did. Because even after Hitler came to power, many of them refused to leave. I'm a German. Oh, and I've got the documentation, because I know without them bullets, I'm a dead man. So that the Eastern European Jews were always looked down upon. They were the last of the wave. The ones that came here in the latter half of the 19th century. The ones that settled on the east side, no, those were Eastern European Jewry. And it was from this group that people like Samuel Goldwyn, Samuel Goldfish, alias Samuel Goldwyn, Louis Mayer, George Chukar, Joe Schenck, Louis Mayer, you know, of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, Sam Mayer, the Schenck brothers, Joseph and Nicholas Jesse Lasky, famous players, Paramount Studios. The Eastern European Jew Carl Lemler, who founded Universal Studios. Harry Cohn, C-O-H-N, the big wheelman of Columbia. All Eastern European Jews all came from a different area. Now, one of the things that we have to say, looking at how people treat each other, that's one of the reasons I looked at that before, shared that with you. If you can understand the schism in the way the Western European Jewry looked down on Eastern European Jewry, their thing was, well, I have to give you charity. I recognize that you are Jewish, but I don't associate with you. I do not marry with you. We do not go to the same synagogue. Temple Emmanuel in New York is the outstanding example of the German Jewry or our crowd synagogue. There, even today, very few Eastern European Jews either get married there or worship there, only after they have made their name. So what that did to the Eastern European Jews, the ones beyond the pale, Poland, Russia, and whatnot, it gave them a sense of paranoia, and obviously they did not like their Western European Jews or German Jewish brothers, because they got there first. The Rothschilds, the people that run Wall Street, all them folks that making the headline now, John Gutfried, the Lehmans, the Morgenthors, the Salomons, the Schiffs, Jacob Schiff, who originally organized the Union Pacific Railroad, all of these represented German or Western Jewry. Now, these glove salesmen, etc., who comes from Eastern Europe, just like the old German Jews went west and became peddlers, and ultimately ended up with places like Abraham and Strauss, or Riches in Atlanta, or many other things, all these problems, Gimbels, Maces, I beg pardon? Levi's. That's where they got started. Many of them, like Goldwater's father, converted into one or the other of the Christian sects. And because they were Jews and whites, when they went peddling in the South, they were treated like whites. They bought plantations. They owned slaves. They whipped slaves behind. They sold slaves. They slept with their slaves and put the children out in the field the same as their Christian counterparts did. In other words, it would be honest to say that because of slavery in the South, Jews in the South got more status than they ever had anywhere else in the Western world, because there was us as the mudsill below them. In other words, where we were, they could not touch bottom. That meant that they had no vested interest culturally with us. If anything, where would their interest lie? With white men, and keeping us condemned. We have here all these tools. Well, I'll have plenty of time to rest when I'm dead. Here we is. This, very hard to come by. It's called A Documentary History of Jews in the United States, from 1654, 1855, edited by Morris U. Schappes, S-C-H-A-P-P-E-S, whose Jewish credentials are impeccable. And one little bit in here, a couple of pieces I want to share with you. There's pieces in here on Jews willing slaves to their families. I'm sure all of you have heard of the story of Sir Jeffrey Amherst and his plan to impregnate blankets with smallpox. Well, you know about that. Smallpox. Yes, ma'am. Couldn't stand Indians. And I'll have to share a little something with you. Here's a bit, our document 112, Abolitionist Report, from the 20th Annual Report of the Americans for Foreign Anti-Slavery Society, presented at New York on May 11, 1853. And Dr. Schappes says, this section of the report summarizes what those who had been active in the organized abolitionist movement for more than 20 years knew and thought of the extent of the participation of Jews in that movement up to 1853. Noteworthy is the disappointment so poignantly expressed in the last sentence of this excerpt. This section on the Jews is the last one in the portion of the report dealing with the views, attitudes, and activities of some 20 religious organizations. The conclusion reached is that it will be seen that slavery has steadily increased within the pale of the Christian denomination during the last half-century, as it has within the limits of our political organization. And here's what this report of the Abolitionists, American Abolitionist Society, on May 11, 1853, said about the Jewish attitude toward slavery. The Jews of the United States have never taken any steps whatever with regard to the slavery question. As citizens, they deem it their policy, quote, to have everyone choose whichever side he may deem best to promote his own interest and the welfare of his country. They have no organization of an ecclesiastical body to represent their general views. So how are you going to talk about this long-standing intergood relationship with blacks and Jews if they don't have no organization to do that officially? They have no General Assembly or its equivalent. The American Jews have 2 newspapers, but they do not interfere in any discussion which is not material to their religion. Obviously, slavery didn't come under that heading. It cannot be said that the Jews have formed any denominational opinion on the subject of American slavery. Some of the Jews who reside in slave states have refused to have any property in man or even have any slaves about them. They do not believe that anything analogous to slavery as it exists in this country ever prevailed among the ancient Israelites. In other words, these folks were denying that slavery had ever been there with them. But they profess to believe, quote, that the belief of Abraham, enlarged by Moses and now acknowledged by the Jews, is one of purity and morality, and one which presents the strongest possible support for civil society, especially a government based upon principles of equality and liberty of the person. So how much equality did the slave have? They believe that the coming of the King Messiah will be the signal for universal peace, universal freedom, universal knowledge, and universal worship of the one eternal Jehovah. And the final thing of the statement says, the objects of so much mean prejudice and unrighteous oppression as the Jews have been for ages, surely they, it would seem, more than any other denomination, ought to be the enemies of caste and the friends of universal slavery. Were they? No. And let me give you my next excerpt. It's a little longer. I won't bore you with it all. In a rabbi in New York, Dr. Morris Raphael, jumped all over the Reverend Dr. Henry Ward Beecher of Plymouth Church. He was the brother of the lady that wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin. What's the lady's name? Harriet Beecher Stowe. Beecher, that was his name. And Rabbi was very upset that, Plymouth Church was used as a station on the Underground Railroad. And Reverend Dr. Beecher was, of course, militantly outspoken in his opposition to slavery. And the Rabbi, Raphael, who was the head rabbi of all the Jews in New York City at that time, the most prestigious member that the Jews had, took it upon himself to jump down Reverend Beecher's throat for being against slavery. At one point he says, how dare Dr. Beecher get up and argue against something that was sanctioned in the Bible. He goes on to say, because it's too much to read, he goes on to say here, that the slavery of the ancient Israelites had nothing to do at all, nothing in common with the benighted niggers and savages that were being dragged into civilization against their will by the slave system in the United States of America. Now, if he were just an ordinary person saying that, he could pass it up. But this was the leading, outstanding rabbinical scholar of his time. And he went on to say, to argue that Africa is the equal of the white man is absurd in the extreme. It runs about 7 pages. Now, Morris Shapers is Jewish in Jeffers. You think maybe that's on this to a Pope. You don't do that to white folks. And he was very upset about it. So what he said, Jews and smallpox, man, you're in bad shape today. That's because you got nasty. My grandma knocked that out of your hand. I hope you ain't lost nothing. Yeah. May I continue? Jews and smallpox, page 111. Sir Jeffrey Amherst, the genocidal commander-in-chief of His Majesty's forces in North America, came in 1758 to fight the French after gaining a solid reputation as a British officer in Germany in the War of the Austrian Succession. Now, I have to tell you a little about this. This is an aside, because, I always like to mess on people, bashing these folks over the head, which I have no right to do. One of his responsibilities in his new position was to annihilate the Indian population. You heard that? To annihilate the Indian population. And it was he who conceived the strategy to spread smallpox among them by way of infected gift blankets. Now, a smallpox epidemic had hit the area, so that's right. His greatest adversary was Chief Pontiac. And you know how we do it. Yeah, that's the man that they named the car for. So they ice you and annihilate you, then after you're safely dead, or they even name a Jeep after you, the Cherokee. People something else. What I tell you my grandma used to say? No shame. So Pontiac, who had organized a coalition of Indian tribes to defend their homeland and was successful in frustrating the European encroachment, Amherst felt that the Native American, quote, was the vilest race of beings that ever infected the earth, and whose written from it must be esteemed a meritorious act for the good of mankind. Now, that's why I showed you that. Now, this is what this man, that his people done this, I showed his book, and this is what he's calling these people. To annihilate them would be a service to mankind. Hell, we didn't say that. Jefferson didn't say this. He said it. And they should, when they are captured, quote, immediately be put to death, talking about the Indians, their extirpation being the only security for our future safety. And their late treacherous proceedings deserves no better treatment from our hands. Now, whose land was this, y'all, that this man was talking about? Thank you. Amherst's pathological hatred for the Indians knew no limit. Coexistence with them was not an option. In a postscript of a 1763 letter to Colonel Henry Bouquet, Amherst wrote, "Could it not be contrived to send the smallpox among these disaffected tribes of Indians? We must on this occasion use every stratagem in our power to reduce them." Rabbi Schaffman wrote this, another rabbi who, in the book called Jews of the Frontier, we owe him the responsibility, the credit for digging up this document. Rabbi Harold Schaffman, S-C-H-A-R-F-M-A-N. He explains the events that followed and the involvement of Jewish Indian traders. Quote, Captain Ukiah then called upon Levi Andrew Levy at his trading post. He told how he tricked the chief into accepting the deadly gifts and placed an order to replace the blankets and handkerchiefs. This grim invoice accompanied the new goods, a receipt of which was duly acknowledged by Commandant Ecoyer. And you can't see it all, but here it is. This is, and then the document is in Levy's hand. And he's asking for what? For compensation for money played. And I will read it to you. 2 blankets at 2 pounds. 1 silk handkerchief at 10 pence. This was the currency of exchange before the dollar came. 1 linen handkerchief at 3 shillings 6 pence. Total, 2 pounds, 13 shillings and 6 pence. Fort Pitt, August 15th, 1763. And signed S. Commandant. And he said, I hereby certify that the above articles were had for the uses above mentioned. So you see our friend Levy submitted a bill after going out to replace the contaminated smallpox blankets that he sold out to these unsuspecting people. And our courier says that, right? Now, and he says down here below, 70 Shawnee, Mingo, and Delaware Indians, that is, fell before the unseen enemy smallpox. Many more undoubtedly died, for the Indians had no resistance to the white man's diseases. Rabbi Harold Schaffman, not Dr. Leonard Jeffries. I think you're beginning to see why ain't none of their big guns coming out to debate us. Now, one of the richest men that ever lived in this country. You all probably know him as the man whose name, or college bears the name, one of the city university colleges bears his name, Bernard Baruch, Baruch College. Southern born, raised. Father came to South Carolina as a young man from Austria to avoid serving in the Imperial Kaiser's army. He came to South Carolina. He married there. He was a doctor. He married there a Jewish lady whose family started out in Newport, a cousin, a distant cousin of Lopez. The names are there. The word Baruch in Hebrew, by the way, means blessed, which is another irony. Simon Blessed married this son of this wealthy family. She was also a daughter of the Confederacy, his mother, and a member of the Daughters of the Revolution because of her connection with Newport. Baruch's father owned a huge plantation and about 300 slaves in South Carolina. The father served as a doctor in the Confederate Army during the Civil War, was captured twice and released because he was a doctor in exchange for another doctor. After the war, they came here to New York, where Baruch went, and he attended, surprise, surprise, City College. Now watch what happened. The City College at that time, in the late 19th century, did not permit Jews to belong to any of the clubs, fraternities. Yeah, I'm talking about City College. But nobody was screaming about it. Nobody was calling nobody anti-Semitic. And you had to look hard to see a Moses Mosetta. He couldn't join a fraternity or anything, even though he came from a wealthy Jewish family whose mother was a member of both the Daughters of the Confederacy, Daughters of the Revolution. His mother's father, Sailing Wolf, W-O-L-F-E, was a relative and a co-partner with the Lopezes and the Rivieras, who was Lopez's father-in-law, in a special kind of trade. Anybody need 3 guesses? African slave trade. His grandfather owned 2 ships, Plied the triangular coast from West Africa to Caribbean here and back. Got rich off it. Baruch wrote about it in his own autobiography. Now watch this. Shades of Linda Jeffries. Here's what the eminent Bernard Baruch said. He said, yes, my grandfather owned slave ships and sold slaves, but he had doctors on his slave ships. Well, after all, that meant if one of his pieces of property got sick. So, but if he doctored the slave, what was he doing? He was doctoring it in whose interest? His interest. Was a dead slave any use to Sailing Wolf? No. And they must have respected the old man because one of Bernard's brothers was named for the grandfather. And then Baruch goes on to say, in any event, the slate was wiped clean for what we suffered in the South after the Civil War, doing Reconstruction. So that made all bets off. Now, as you know, Baruch became an extremely wealthy man during World War I speculating. He became a very powerful man in political circles. They called him the man behind the scenes, worked with Roosevelt and all of these people. During the Roosevelt administration, Baruch was worth at that time probably $200 million. It's astronomical to think about this today now, but watch the difference. How many of them can put their noses in the Gentiles behind. Now you would think with anybody with that kind of money and that kind of power, he could have bought and sold Franklin D. Roosevelt 100 times. Roosevelt came from, blue-blooded aristocracy, but he didn't have that kind of money. Baruch was his advisor, member of the War Industries Board, World War I, World War II, big man. Yeah, this is, y'all don't need to think about this because this book costs $25, but it's worth it. So don't even ask me. Page 172. I don't even know where I find all this stuff. It's like if my grandma just guides my hand sometime, and I stumble over places. Naturally, most of this stuff I'm reading from to y'all naturally is out of print. Page 172. I'm not going to bore you unduly, but you have to hear this because then that way, you see, it's one thing to report and say what somebody said. These folks take that and run. You're lying. Page 172. The American Disraeli. Baruch never considered standing for elective office. In fact, he considered himself a potential liability to others in politics because of his enormous speculative wealth and his Jewish birth. Both made him hesitant to accept appointive office. He may have been paranoid on this matter, but regular and frequent assaults upon his heritage and business justified such paranoia. In other words, Henry Ford and all of them was calling him a Jew bastard every day, calling him everything they could think of uncomplimentary. But he still considered them his friends, his ace boon coons. Washington had many Jew haters, many of whom were Baruch's friends or acquaintances. And it wasn't that they were secret closet Jew haters. They made the cracks. He was either the exception to or the confirmation of their prejudice. Respectable Jew haters preferred their Jews poor and quiet. Their stereotype was that Jews were rich, egotistical, and ostentatious. It was bad enough that Jews frequently made their money in disreputable ways without their conspicuously flaunting that wealth. When President Wilson had discussed a position for Bernard Baruch with Josephus Daniels, who was the editor and secretary of the Navy World War I, the North Carolina editor reminded him that Baruch was, quote, somewhat vain. To which Wilson responded, did you ever see a Jew that wasn't? The young Eleanor Roosevelt, I'm sure most of y'all are familiar, that was Franklin's wife, liked the loyally crusading Louis Brandeis, who was, was a Jewish Supreme Court justice, and the genteel Morgenthau family, Henry Morgenthau Jr. If you got any money back from the 30s and 40s. You see, he was Secretary Roosevelt, Secretary of the Treasury. His name is on there. His son, Robert Morgenthau, is now the district attorney for the borough of Manhattan. All right? So Eleanor Roosevelt liked these two families, but they were the exception to her distaste for Jews. In 1918, to a party for Baruch, she swore she would, quote, rather be hung than seen there. But she went and later reported, the Jew party was appalling. That's President of the United States wife talking, y'all. Why? Because she did not like Jews. I never wish to hear money, jewels, and sables mentioned again. Lincoln Colcord was another progressive friend of Baruch. With greater regard for the uses of Baruch's money than for wealthy Jews. He courted Baruch's friendship in 1917, even as he confided to his sister about Baruch's wife. Mrs. Baruch is a typical rich bounder of a Jew woman, and she's trying her damnedest to marry her daughter to my son. But he would go and borrow money from Baruch, it's all documented here, which he didn't intend to pay back, and which Baruch knew he wasn't going to pay back. But he hung around him, and he knew it. He said, don't cause you no problems. He never once called any of these people anti-Semitic. None of them did. Henry Ford had a newspaper called the Dearborn Independent. He used to beat Jews like they were going out of style. Bernard Baruch in particular called him everything but a child of God. Kite, this, that, all these derogatory names. And yet later on, when Henry Ford wanted to buy the Muscle Shoals area in Alabama and was having problem getting federal permission to do so, guess who came out on his side? Bernard Baruch. And he was reminded, how can you support somebody who thinks and knows that he hates you? And he says, well, you know, I'm only going for what is best. I could cite you example at this. This is now, the man that wrote this, Jordan Schwartz, his Jewish credentials are impeccable. Not Jeffries, not Mackey. He's a full professor of history at Northern Illinois University Press. The book was published by the University of North Carolina Press at Chapel Hill. Enough said? Another book. So we don't have to come back to this anymore. And I ain't going to ask you all how much time I got because I don't want to know. This book, The Politics of Rescue, Henry Feingold, the Roosevelt administration, I tie what I just said, and the Holocaust, 1938 to 1945. You have in this book, and you have to take my word, I think you'll be able to understand. You have what I said to you earlier, the German Jews themselves. Feingold was born in Germany. Born in Ludwigshafen, Germany in 1931. His family was able to leave in 1938 just in time to escape the Nazi terror. After earning his master's degree from Brooklyn College in 1954, he entered the U.S. Army and served as a linguist interrogator of East German defectors and guys in Germany, not far from his birthplace. He completed his PhD. He got a doctorate program at New York University, completed his PhD in 1966, and at the time of the writing his book, this was professor of history at Bernard Baruch College of the city of New York. This book was published by Yoe State University, Rutgers, 1970. And what he has to say here he talks about none of these people wanted nothing to do with saving the Jews, including the rich American Jews. It's all documented. Right? And they go on to say here, that the Jewish war veterans said, we are not going to leave. This is when Hitler first started organizing this thing to kids. I'm not going to leave here. I fought for this country in World War I, and ain't nobody going to chase me out of my country. The Eastern European Jews, to their credit, realized what was happening. Many of them got out. Now, that's why this yelling and screaming at Jefferson about the anti-Semitism, a lot of these people are covering up because they know the history of what was played here. Roosevelt, it's all documented here, had no intention of doing nothing extra to try to save these. It's documented. Why? Baruch, that same man that I just said, he didn't want him here either. We're talking about German Jews now. He said, he, the Layman, the Solomon, and all of these wealthy, upper-class Jews, Brandeis, Justice Felix Frankfurter, all were against bringing in Jewish refugees into the United States. And guess what their reason was? They said, we have enough anti-Semitism in the United States now. And if we let all of these people come in here, it will increase the anti-Semitism and all of us will be at risk. Mr. Baruch wanted to send them to Africa, Kenya, in somebody else's country that's known. One ship had 1,000 Jews that came and floated down here in Cuba now for over 3 months. The Germans said at one point, you want them? You can have them. That's all a minute. See, when they yell at Jeffers, they see, again, what I tell you about the magician? Diverting your attention while he, right? Smoke screen. You want them, you can have them. If you're willing to pay for them, I'll let them go. Even up until 1939, the Germans were trying to negotiate deals where they could exchange Jews for arms or other stuff that they needed, or money or credits. They know this. And the capitalism business is business. And Baruch and other very powerful Jews who had the inside track on the highest people of power in this country were saying no. Now, when that motor ship left, I forget the name, it traveled everywhere. It came to New York. No way, Jose. Canada said, forget it. Mexico, Cuba almost took them in. But the United States State Department, which was anti-Semitic from top bottom, said no. What do you think happened to these 1,000 human beings? Say that again, please. And what happened to them? Put in the gas chambers. Now, wouldn't you say that the powerful American Jews, at least in that, would have their hands bloody about this? All right? Now, that now leads us into the nitty-gritty of tonight, and I know you're tired, but hey, listen, it takes me more a long time to get it than you. During that same period, as the world became known of this horror, what was happening, many Jewish refugees from Germany, some of whom you may know if you're a movie buff, Billy Wilder, who was the director and writer, the musician, Arnold Schoenberg, and many other people, artists came over from Germany, and of course they beat a track to Hollywood. Bertolt Brecht, Kurt Weill, Threepenny Opera fame. They came and they got jobs because this is this thing. Now look at the flip-flop. Now you understand what I told you about the cultural differences between the Eastern Germans and Western Germans. The tables are turned now, ain't they? Who is on top in Hollywood? The Russian Jews. Who are the refugees coming in now? The German Jews. So here comes the bottom rail now, who is standing up in the top rail says, let me in. So these people started agitating with these powerful studios. Louis Mayer, Metro-Goldwyn Mayer, the Schenck brothers of Paramount, Limnus, University, many of some of who was even German born. They are slaughtering our people. The Canadian government said no. The few that they let get in England, the British treated them as enemy aliens, even though they knew that they left Germany by the skin of their teeth. They wasn't about to give them refugee status. And then by classifying them as any aliens, what did they do with them? They slapped their butts in concentration camps. Canada did the same thing. After all, it's a British Dominion. If you got banned, stayed up there till after the war. Where's that history, y'all? Did Leonard Jeffries do that? Did anybody in this room do that? Most of y'all here wasn't even a gleam in your parents' eyes. So then these refugees naturally says, here you've got this huge propaganda machine here, a possible thing. Make some movies to show this horrible thing that's happened to our fellow Jews in Germany. And those wealthy Hollywood Jews, studio executives said, we ain't got nothing to do with us, we Americans. Read an empire of their own. I keep trying to get that to you. It's all been documented. Here. The anti-Semitism was so rampant, and the man said, it is anti-Semitism of anti-Semitic Jews. I am not going to make nothing. Watch this, 341. I believe. Joseph P. Kennedy. Any of y'all know who he was? Who was he? That is correct. You remember he also, after he was Frank Costello, the Godfather, see how this time he was Frank Costello's partner in bootleg and rum running during Prohibition. He also invested a lot of this money. He became one of the top people at RKO Studios. One of the people involved in RKO Studios was Howard Hughes. But they're telling me there ain't no connection. Who was called the Godfather of the underworld? Frank Costello. They were tight with the Kennedys throughout their lives. Joseph Kennedy, who was a big contributor to Roosevelt, y'all see how the thing ties in now, was appointed ambassador to England, the Court of St. James. And all laid out here now, the man that wrote this book, Neil Gabler, is another Jewish scholar. Again, not me or Leonard or nobody else that looked like anybody in this room. And what he, no, don't tell that child that. That's natural. You did it when you was a child, I did it. And someday, he's sitting up there and somebody else will be doing it. I can keep on going. Don't worry about that. That's natural. They also knew, the Jews in Hollywood, producers, was afraid that a lot of people out there were anti-Semitic. And they were constantly looking to do what they could to break the Jewish power over Hollywood. Now, them folks wasn't black. We ain't had that kind of power back in the 40s. So these folks were walking on eggshells. People saying, come out here, do this, do that. Now, Joe Kennedy comes back from England. And as I said, he was a big investor in the movies. Remember, Gloria Swanson was his woman for over 40 years. He would take that's why them boys, Ted, is the way they are. The chip don't, oh yes. Joe Kennedy was the man, and everybody said this, not me, that there was two things he liked. He was completely amoral. He liked power and pleasure. And he would try to seduce his son's girlfriends when they brought them home from college. He would, if he liked one, he'd tell the girl, what are you hanging around Teddy or Jack or Joe for? They ain't got no money. I got the money. Why don't you come for me? I wasn't there. This man was something else. Now, he was also a Nazi sympathizer. They knew this too. So he decided, he took it upon himself, page 344, to warn the Jewish studio heads about doing anything to upset the Germans. And here's what he says. Page 344, paragraph 2. The Jews' paranoia wasn't entirely unjustified. Late in 1940, the United States ambassador to England, Joseph P. Kennedy, who was suspected as a Nazi sympathizer, paid a visit to Hollywood and requested an audience with the major Jewish executives. Quote, he spoke to the gathering for about 3 hours. This is Douglas Fairbanks, Jr. reporting to Roosevelt. He wrote to Roosevelt after talking to a number of individuals who attended. He stated that although he did not think that Britain would lose the war, still she had not won it yet. He repeated very forcefully that there was no reason for our ever becoming involved in any way. But Kennedy didn't stop there. Quote, he apparently threw the fear of God into many of our producers and executives by telling them that the Jews were on the spot and that they should stop making anti-Nazi pictures or using the film medium to promote or show sympathy to the cause of the democracies versus the dictators. He said that anti-Semitism was growing in Britain and that the Jews were being blamed for the war. He continued to underline the fact that the film business was using its power to influence the public dangerously, and that we all, and the Jews in particular, would be in jeopardy if they continued to abuse their power. The executives were shocked. As a result of Kennedy's cry for silence, Ben Hecht later wrote, quote, all of Hollywood's top Jews went around with their grief hidden like a Jewish fox under their Gentile vests. Hecht is Jewish. Gabler is Jewish. 1940, I think Lynn Jeffries was approximately 4 years old. So he couldn't have wrote this. We go on to 470. You say something? And I might have done this before. No, 276, 28. They're talking about people casually sitting. I may have read this before, but I'm going to repeat it because there may be people who were not here before. All of the major clubs in Hollywood barred them. Louis B. Mayer managed to get into one before they voted to bar any Jews. And guess who voted along with the rest of the Gentiles to bar the Jews? Louis Mayer. It's a matter of record. He was the head of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Studio, son, right? Now, and here are people who are talking about, they talked about the Independent, and Henry Ford is Dearborn Independent. Just mention him, the Ford Motor Company. He wrote in 1921, he said, Hollywood is Jew controlled, not in spots only, the film industry. Not 50% merely, but entirely, with the natural consequence that now the world is in arms against the trivializing and demoralizing influence of that form of entertainment as presently managed. As soon as the Jews gained control of the movies, we had a movie problem. This is an editorial in Henry Ford Dearborn Independent, by him, signed by him. the consequences of which are not yet visible. It is the genius of that race to create problems of a moral character in whatever business they achieve a majority. Now, no newspaper's headline went out and called him anti-Semitic or called him nothing. Henry Ford was one of the most powerful rich men in the country and had a newspaper and ranted after Jews 7 days a week, every day. The Jews, some Jews brought him to court on a civil suit, and Ford had so much contempt that he wouldn't even hire a lawyer. He went in to defend himself. He lost the suit. He said, I wouldn't hire a lawyer to defend this. Another famous rabid anti-Semite, of course, was Thomas Edison, the man that created Edison, New Jersey, whatnot. He was Henry's ace boon-coon. And we have documents where they would sit around and take turns vilifying Jews. I haven't heard yet where anybody Jewish stopped using the electric or trying to turn off electricity. Or no Gentile newspaper headline. And these people were openly anti-Semitic. They didn't hide it. Now listen to that. He goes on to say, a month later, the Independent conceded, it is not that the producers of Semitic origins have deliberately set out to be bad according to their own standards, but they know that their whole taste and temper are different from the prevailing standards of the American people. Many of these producers don't know how filthy their stuff is. It is so natural to them. Not Leonard Jeffries. Did you read any of this in your history books?
Never.
How many people you think know about this? But they all know Leonard Jeffries. Others couch their attacks against the European-born Hollywood Jews in a cloak of nativism. The notion that immigrants were corrupt in this country, quote, no foreign bunch can come over here and tell us how we ought to observe the Lord's Day, preached evangelist Billy Sunday, who was the Billy Graham of his time. Nobody called him an anti-Semite, and everybody knew which foreign group he was talking about. And he was thumping for laws that would prohibit the showing of movies on Sunday. The United States at heart, quoting, is a God-fearing and a God-loving nation, and most of our laxity on this point I lay at the door of those elements which are part of our population but are not yet assimilated. Another religious zealot blasted the movies, alleged seduction of hundreds of thoughtless girls every day, which he saw as a part of America's general Europeanization. And he pressed for federal censorship laws. The Hollywood Jews said little in their own defense. What could they say? But William Brady, Jukor's old partner who had become president of a trade group called the National Association of Motion Picture Industry, promised, if these slanderers, Jew baiters, and Catholic haters are not silenced, we must fight to the finish with no quarter. 10 years later, in 1931, the Christian Century, a popular conservative Protestant journal, was still flogging the movie Jews. This time in the form of an open letter from one embarrassed Jew to his Hollywood confreres. I am a Jew, he wrote, but I am ashamed of my kinship with you Jews of Hollywood. I am ashamed of kinship with the people who have wholly forgotten their spiritual mission and are now engaged only in the feverish acquisition of wealth by pandering to the worst instincts of humanity. Even within Hollywood itself, there was mumbling about Jewish control. For some, it was the handiest rationale for thwarted dreams. Theodore Dreiser had been lured out to Hollywood in the 30s to oversee the film production of his monumental novel, An American Tragedy. But he later battled hammer and tongs with Paramount over what he felt was the traducing of his masterpiece. And now he had departed, trying to raise money for a new project on tobacco monopolist James Buchanan Duke, for whom Duke University was named for. When this failed, Dreiser blamed the Jews. He wrote a satire suggesting that Jews be rounded up and packed off to Kansas where they couldn't do any more harm. I think Lynn Jeffries was about 3 years old. To a friend, he wrote, "The movies are solidly Jewish. They've dug in, employ only Jews with American names. The dollar sign is the guide mentally and physically. That America should be led, the mass, by their direction is beyond all believing. In addition, they are arrogant, insolent, and contemptuous." Director Howard Hawks, the gentleman that directed Scarface and other movies, he complained that Jews were loud. "Do you notice how noisy it is in here suddenly?" he asked actress Lauren Bacall over lunch. Y'all know her. That's because Leo Farbstein, who was head of the Warner Brothers music department, just walked in. Jews always make more noise. Hey, listen, I told y'all it was a long night. You came for the truth. Bacall, who was born Betty Perske, P-E-R-S-K-E, from New York, said nothing. She was afraid that Hawks might find out that she was Jewish and fire her. Now, getting there. If I can sleep late tomorrow, I don't know where y'all gonna be. If I get there. You can always ask me, I'll stop, man. Yeah, let's see.
We got a lot of work to do, huh?
Yeah, beats picking cotton. and even pays better, y'all. Even take up a little collection for me. Right? When I was spending all the time doing and learning, I didn't never think that he'd be one person listening to me. I was doing because I thought, right? So I'm way the hell ahead of the game. This is a biography of Samuel Goldwyn, born Goldfish. And I don't want to go through the whole thing, but we're talking about this relationship and the lies and the denigration of blacks. It came to pass that in Goldwyn's career, this is Goldwyn production, he wanted to make a movie of Porgy and Bess. Yeah. I said Goldwyn wanted to make a movie of it. I mean, he did. All right? And it's the kind of trickiness that they went through. Now remember, Jeffers lied, and here's what A. Scott Berg, I don't know where I'm getting all these Jewish authorities from, but they just came out that way, who is also white and Jewish. And he comes from Connecticut and graduated from Princeton, right here in your state. He's known as an authority on the movies and whatnot, and he's written several biographies. This one of Samuel Goldwyn. And he's talking about this was Goldwyn's pet project because he'd always liked this movie. Now here's what Brother Berg tells us. Now when he got a director and whatnot, got a producer, now he's got to get a cast. Getting a first-class cast, the right cast, proved to be Goldwyn's most formidable task on the film, because black actors had de facto long been barred from Hollywood's major studios except to tap dance and play maids and shuffling lazybones. So when Lynn Jeffers talked about Hollywood didn't, as though you didn't know this, here's Berg saying the same thing. No serious part, right? You wanted to play the flunky, the step and fetch it, that's your role. And we're going to look at that briefly, whether you're ready for it or not. Few had the opportunity to become stars. The Cafe Au Lait Lena Horne had come closest to acceptance by white audiences, but her roles in films were mostly, quote, guest appearances. Numbers that could be snipped out of prints playing in southern theaters. Now, what they used to do, in case you know, back in the 30s or 40s, if they had a black person doing a dancing like the Nicholas Brothers or Lena Horne or Cab Calloway or Bojangles, they would cut it, they would put it into the story plot in such a way that they could cut out that whole section where the blacks appeared without destroying the storyline of the movie. You didn't know that, did you? Uh-huh. Yeah. So it meant, so they would, that would mean if they were playing Hollywood Goes to Town, when they would build that movie in Harlem, or starring Lena Horne, the same movie, the print that went to Savannah or Charleston or Memphis, her name wouldn't be there, not on any of the stills. There was a guy in Memphis, Boss Crumpet, who said that no nigger would ever play any kind of respectable role on the screen in Memphis because no respecting white person would want to see it. So they routinely cut out these scenes. They could be put back in the prints that were going to be shown in black communities and cut out with no effort lost shown in white communities. But Jeffries lied. So here we go on now. This is what he's talking about. Now, he said it looked for a moment as though James Edward, he's a guy that played in a movie called Home of the Brave, died just recently. He also played Patton's valet in that movie with George C. Scott. I think that probably would have been his last movie. James Edward, who portrayed the victimized soldier in Home of the Brave, it looked as though he might make it, but he did not catch on. Most recently, a fine-featured West Indian, I ain't said that, fine feature, I don't know the hell fine people, that's them, named Harry Belafonte was crossing the color line with his performances in Carmen Jones and Ireland in the Sun. To the generation of young black actors trying to break through, the movie screen of the late 50s became as crucial a battleground in the fight for equality as the buses of Montgomery. Len Jeffries didn't write this. Scott Berg did. Porgy and Bess struck many of them, as a giant step backwards. A story of fornication, drug addiction, and murder, all told in heavy dialect, that did nothing but reinforce negative stereotypes of blacks. Harry Belafonte flatly turned down the lead, and several actors refused other roles. Only Sammy Davis Jr., an extremely successful nightclub performer, especially in the new desert playground of Las Vegas, built by the Jewish gangster Bugsy Siegel, of course, and taken over by the Italian Patriots now. Only he campaigned for a role, that of sporting life. One night at a party at Judy Garland's, he came in and sang several of the numbers. "Swear on your life you'll never use him," said Lee Gershwin, who is Ira Gershwin's son. And he said that turning to Samuel Goldwyn. "Him?" replied Goldwyn. "That monkey?" Now these yo-yos that's jumping all over Jeffries, why the hell they got all of these libraries? All they got to do, and all this heavy high-tech computers. I don't even know how to use a computer. Why can't they say, go look, they're not interested in truth. All right? Now, what's the lie? I'm quoting, "I represent the greatest Negro actor in the whole world." Lillian Sherry wrote Goldwyn upon learning of his intentions to make Porgy and Bess. The actor's name was Sidney Poitier. He was a strapping Bahamian with decidedly Negroid features and dark skin. Just 30, he had picked up a few movie roles since his debut in 1950. Then in 1957, worked in 3 films back-to-back. He's not a singer, Mrs. Small wrote, but that is never too much of a problem where the part requires a fine actor. For one of the few times Goldwyn saw an actor's work that equaled an agent's claim, he made a firm offer of $75,000 for Poitier to play Porgy. And since y'all are sitting down, I don't have to ask you to read the next lines. Mrs. Smalls was not actually Poitier's agent. She lied. Martin Baum in New York was. And she was an independent agent on the West Coast with whom Baum sometimes associated himself. So when she wrote to Goldwyn that she represented Sidney Poitier, she didn't represent him at all. Goldwyn jumped on this. And Poitier said in his book, This Life, he said, I had a national verdict. I didn't want to play that part. He didn't want to play it any more than Belafonte. They'd offered Pearl Bailey the part. Goldwyn said to him, have a good evening, y'all. Goldwyn said to him, either you play this part, or what'd you say? Or you won't work in Hollywood. I have put my money out. I have made statements, held press conferences, and my reputation is on the line. And they put the pressure on Sidney, and it was either as they said it was. So where did Jeffries lie? All right? Now, I have to cover one more base if your behinds are still not too sore. The connection between the mob and this whole concept. We know this to be true, and it's written several places. This is a biography, Bob Thomas, King Khan. Take off on King Khan. King Khan, Harry Khan, the chief executive of Columbia Pictures, who was also connected with CBS, Columbia, all them other things, right? And Columbia Records. In the late 30s, a Russian Jewish gentleman by the name of Willie Bioff, B-I-O-F-F, who had been a former pimp in Pecura back east, went to Chicago. Matter of fact, he served a few months in jail for living off the proceeds of prostitution. Went to Chicago and became connected with Al Capone. Movies in the 30s was making big bucks, y'all. 5 cents got you in for the matinee, and they had to chase us kids out. You went, you got one first-class movie, a grade A movie, a grade B movie, part of a serial, a newsreel, am I correct? Newsreel, a couple of Tom and Jerry cartoons or something else, and they gave out free dishes and a travel log, all for 10 cents. Certain days, like on Wednesday matinee, there was 2 for 15. People literally lived in the movies. Times were hard. The movies was that was distraction. And black folks did it like everybody else. And it affected and impacted on us like everybody else. So this is big money. Stars are earning $3,000 or $4,000 a week in 1934, 35, riding around in Duesenbergs, cars that don't exist anymore that used to cost $2,000 at that time. That would be like almost $100,000 today. Now, was the mob, organized crime, going to sit aside and not want to get any of that? Can any of y'all believe that they were going to sit aside and say, no? So Bioff came out to Hollywood as the advance man for one Alphonse Capone. I know some of y'all going to say, how you know this? Well, I didn't. But you can know it too, as simple as I did. To find ways of moving in on the movie industry. Mr. Bioff found a union there, the IATSE, I-A-T-S-E, the International Association of Theatrical Stage Hands and Theater Workers. The union wasn't doing too well, didn't have too many members, falling off. But Mr. Bioff, having the connection he had, and part of the business that the organized crime had was labor racketeering, went in and began to organize, and he got the union on his side. Didn't take much. You know, either you come with me or I make you an offer you can't refuse, even though that term hadn't been invented at that time. To make a long story longer, he took over the union, and naturally when he went to negotiate with the studios, they got the raises. As the theater union got raises, more and more people joined. Huh? They didn't give a damn who ran it, as long as they were getting their scale. And then Mr. Biafra loaded the boom. He went to all the Hollywood studios. I don't know if you can find it, 1967. Again, not written by anybody black. And he told them, depending on their size, they would have to pay for labor peace. The big studios would have to pay him $300,000 a year. The medium-sized studios anywhere from $200 to $100. And the grade B and C studios like Monogram or Republic would be $25,000 a year. Now bear in mind, that's still, even the $25,000 is a hell of a lot of money in that time. When you consider that somebody who was earning $10 a week considered having themselves a good job. And now you would say, why pay him? One of the groups that were members of the Stagehand Union was the movie projectionists, the folks who sit up in the loft and push them flickers on the screen. And the threat was, if you don't pay, we'll call the movie projectionists out on strike. If the movie projectionists out on strike, all y'all come in here and sitting up there waiting for the movie. What you see? Nothing. Ain't nothing happening up yonder. Now, somehow, some of this leaked to the feds. This is what restraint of trade, extortion, as a law. The government started an investigation. When the studios met, turned out Harry Kahn said, y'all do what you want, I ain't going to pay, because he had a friend who was connected, as you'd say, they mobbed up in the union, so he didn't pay. But all the rest of them paid. And because the rest of them paid, thereby hangs a tale, and we are able to prove the collusion of the truth of what Jeffrey said. Because ultimately, during the investigation, Mr. Joseph Schenck of Paramount, who was head of production then, and his brother Nicholas, denied that he had either been approached, he hadn't been approached, or that he had, and not only had he not been approached, but he had not paid one penny for extortion to Mr. Willie Biafra. But somewhere along the line, we don't have to know all the details, Mr. Willie Biafra saw himself being put away for a long, long time. And naturally, like most people, he didn't have no stomach for that. So he decided to turn state's evidence. Federal trial. This whole series ran about 4 years, from 1937 approximately 1941. Trial went on. Biafra got up, told the whole background, who sent him there, what he was there, and what the purpose was, and blah, 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 who had paid and who hadn't. Among those who had not only been approached and who had paid was one Mr. Joseph Schenck of Paramount, who had lied under oath and said he hadn't. Mr. Joseph Schenck of Paramount Studios was sentenced and spent a year in jail for perjury. This is a matter of record. Any of you in here, even as a student, can write to Washington Archives and get a copy of this transcript. They are public documents. Okay? Biafra, of course, got a lightened sentence. They put him in that federal, what do you call that program? The federal protection program. 1944, I think, when this was on. But anyway, he came out of the protection. They gave him a new name, a new identity. He was no longer Bach. Maybe he was Mr. Smith. Sent him out to Arizona. His new cover was he became a raiser of blooded horses, breed horses. Lived out there from 1944 to 1957. I think that's 13 years. And one morning, Mr. Smith came out to get into his pickup truck to go in town to buy hay or something, turned on the ignition of his vehicle, and I doubt if they found all the pieces yet. It took 13 years. Now, you might say that that was an electrical accident. Yes. And they have found him through some of the same people it was to give him protection. Now, all of these people have seen The Godfather. And they pretend they see it. Because Puzo based all them people on real characters. The Carlisle Hotel in New York today is still considered one of the most prestigious hotels in the country. About 1970 or 67, a gentleman that used to write for the old New York Post, Leonard Katz, K-A-T-Z, wrote a biography of Frank Costello called Uncle Frank, which was what he was known to affectionately. The foreword to that was written by one Anthony Quinn, actor, y'all know him. And he wrote about how he got to know The Godfather. They were in New York filming a movie. I thought it was a pretty good movie. It was just extended this guy's life story of Bumpy Johnson, one of the few Cephalolic gangsters we had. The movie was called Across 110th Street. Remember that movie? All right. You have it? All right. Look at it again. Because in the introduction to this book of Uncle Frank, Anthony Quinn tells how that movie came to be made. He was in New York shooting on location and having all kinds of problems with the officials that be, the police department, everybody can't do this, everybody, right? And being frustrated, spending a lot of money, not getting anywhere. Finally, he was ready to give up. Sitting down one day with either the assistant cameraman or somebody who had a name that ended in a vowel. And he says, damn, why didn't I think of this before? I know who can help us with this. And Quinn says, he says, help us. Yes, says who? He says, who? It's Uncle Frank. He's Uncle Frank. Who? He says, Frank Costello. And Quinn said, he said, Shem, that gangster? He said, oh, wait a minute. He's a gentleman. Listen to me. You want to make this movie here. You got all this money invested here. If you give up now, you've blown everything, yeah. Let's try it. I got his number. Let me call him. So Quinn says, yeah, go ahead. What I got to lose? So the guy makes a call. Pretty soon says, hey, Uncle Frank, this is me. So how are you? You go to Richard. Yeah, and I got this thing. Yeah, we're having this problem. My friend Tony. Yeah, you know Anthony? Yeah, I know him, right. So he wants to talk to you. So he says, Anthony Quinn says, hey, he wants to talk to you. So he says, he picks up the phone and he hears this guy, hey, yeah, how you doing? And at first he thinks somebody's putting me on. But then he realizes that this is the real Uncle Frank Costello. This is no joke. So when he realizes that, because Frank said, he has some problem, I can help you, and he's going to be, make some joke. And something told him, hey, this is not somebody you joke with. This is a real person. So he changed his tone and said, yeah, well, I think I can help you. Maybe whatnot. Yeah, I know this guy. He's good people. What's your problem? All right, he said, I tell you what, says, can we meet? Have a sit down. So Quinn said, yeah. So he says, well, so where can we meet? So Quinn says, he says to him, well, I'm staying at the Carlisle. Do you know it? He says, know it, I own it. If you can find the book called Uncle Frank by Leonard Katz, it's there. You hear what I said? He's in this luxury hotel thinking he's talking down to this little two-bit mustache Pete. How could he know where the Carlisle Hotel was? Know it, hell, not only did he own it, but he owned some of the most choice real estate in New York City. Now, as Quinn said, to make a long story short, they met, very loquacious, guy chatted, whatnot. Went back, said, don't worry about nothing, get your crew out. When do you want to start? Monday morning or whenever. The crews went out, no cops to bother them, no ticket, no nobody. They finished shooting the whole thing in record time, even at the time they had got lost, and nobody said, dog, kiss my foot to them anymore. What the hell are we talking about here, class? Power. And he also talking about why people are screaming and the hypocrisy of these jackals in the press who have to know better. They got to know better. This is not privileged information. In that whole book he tells you, connection and control. Hollywood, you all know Billy Daniels, the guy that's Old Black Magic. In this book, Katz tells about, this is the kind of power that these people had Hollywood entertainment. There was this club where a lot of them used to hang out. You know, the cops and the gangsters all hang out together. You know, it's only the amateurs they figure to give crime a bad name. All of them know each other, know who they are and what they do. One night, Billy Daniel comes in with his wife. He was married to a Caucasian lady, and as this guy tells it, they must have had some argument ongoing when they came in the club. And there was this guy who was a typical Italian Sicilian, loved his people, loved food, good guy, but he hated black folks with a passion. That was his thing. And of course, who he hated more with a passion was black men accompanied in an intimate way with Caucasian ladies. And this guy was sitting at the bar, big man, on a Frank's, ace spoons, and controls a lot of stuff. They didn't go into details, you want to know. But in any event, in the course of this argument, Billy Daniels, now Daniels then was a top drawer. He played in Golden Boy. He was at the peak of his form. Old Black Magic must have sold 20 million copies. He slapped his wife. Whereupon this other Sicilian dude became enraged. He ran over to the table where they were sitting. He picked up Billy Daniels and threw him literally out of the window. They were on the third floor. This is what it said, right? The only things, he's talking to you. What's your question, son? Go ahead, ask me. Listen, it's for you. Yes, the gangster threw Billy Daniels through the plate glass window, down 3 flights. But there was an awning over the bush for Daniels' body hit the awning, which broke his fall, and luckily he got cut in his face. He carried that scar every day. It came over the cover story, and he broke some ribs. This is a matter of record. I didn't make this up. I don't travel in circles. Now, this is a big problem. Daniels had all kinds of, engagements. He's booked. Don't tell me about there ain't no connection. And he can't work because he's laid up in the hospital and he's bandaged up and he can't sing old magic or new magic or no kind of. Right? Now, the dude that owns him professionally, he's pissed off with the guy that threw him out the window. And this guy don't want to move. So what? So who they call on to mediate this? The Godfather, Uncle Frank. And this guy was noted that he wouldn't back down, but he knew and he respected Frank. And it took Frank Costello to say, hey, look, whatever you think, one of the things we don't do, you don't interfere with a domestic squabble. The guy said, well, I thought she was just some broad, and I don't want to see no nigga clapping no bride, even if she's a whore, no white woman. So Frank said, hey, but you were wrong. You made an assumption. He was true. Not only this, it wasn't even just this, but you have caused certain important people to lose something on their investment. Some kind of arrangement has to be made. Now, it's better. All they need is, hey, pay for the guy's bills. You know what I mean? And whatever the loss. And make an apology, and it's all over. The dude didn't want to do it, but out of respect for Costello. And I thought Godfather made us what not. But he did apologized, and the thing was smoothed over. Now, what are we talking about here? We are talking about all kinds of connections. What are we talking? We talking about movies. We talk about entertainment. We're talking about nightclubs. You're talking about the whole 9 yards. Reporters and journalists spend a hell of a lot of time in water holes. Now, you think that the people who write these pieces, the columnists, knocking Jeffries, don't know this? They've got to know it. And even if they don't, any of them, right today, they talk about Damon Runyon, who's the great writer, right? Guys and Dolls. Damon Runyon, Walter Winchell, this is the thing they wrote about. Sherman Billingsley, the guy that owned the stock club that barred black folks, made his money. Him and 3 other brothers out of Oklahoma bootlegging. Knew Joe Kennedy, knew all these other, right? What are you telling me? J. Edgar Hoover, whenever he came to New York, the head of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the chief enforcement agency in this country, where was his hangout? The Stock Club. Had a special damn table that Billingsley kept for him. Did J. Edgar Hoover pay? Did you pay? And these same people had the nerve to try to bar Josephine Baker, an international star, when she came in, was appointed to pack houses on Broadway on the grounds that she was black. Of course, thank you, they did bar. Precisely. So where the hell are the lies? Now, the part of the record, I don't know how many of you saw the Amsterdam News 2 weeks ago, the day that the Board of Trustees met going through that farce on Jeffries. And I was up there, Jeff, standing in the doorway with a picture of Al Jolson, Asa Jolson, a rabbi's son, with a photograph of Jolson, face black, white lips, and all around him he had some of these bullets that I have here. I stood from my spot a minute ago, and I watched at least 50 reporters from white newspapers come by and quickly. They took photographs of Jeff from every angle but under the bottom of his feet. How many photographs showed up in any of their papers the next day? Now, I beg pardon?
Let me answer that.
Yes.
Next time that they have a negative expression, they're going to match that expression with that photo.
Exactly. Now, the Amsterdam News, thank God we do have some of black persons, the only one that printed that thing. Now, what we're working on now, we're going to take that. I have a young man who works. We're going to take that and make T-shirts out of it with the appropriate slogan. All right? In other words, they become conveniently blind when they don't want to see something that isn't to see. Now, how can anybody in their right mind, Jolson was a rabbi's son. The only religious denomination that I know that their spiritual leaders are called rabbis, what denomination is that? Jewish? Yes, it's Judaism. Right? Not imams or preachers or priests. Now, for the benefit of those that don't want, let me give you my experience. I'm a little older than Jeffries. He was 15. But go on, think. I'm sitting a young guy. Remember I told you the movies was the fancy everybody. During the 30s, every movie studio had certain stereotypical genres of movies that they made. They were so standardized that they economized by taking certain portions, like a posse chase, with a crowd chase. And they would save these. And whenever they had to do another Western, rather than reshoot all that, they would just go to the lab, take out that, clip it in where they need it. The grade B studios sometimes would be careless, so that you would see a posse scene running this way, and the next clip, they're running on the other side, which meant that they didn't run it in the right way. Right. Well, these were that's why they called them the grade B and C studios, because it was these attention to detail that was supposed to separate the men from the boys and the girls from women. That the big studios, Warner Brothers, MGM and whatnot, would spend the money to get the best directors and then, of course, because a movie, the content, the dramatic content of a movie ain't out there in the shooting and the acting. It is the editors who make and break a movie. A good editor who can cut creatively is worth his or her weight in gold. So this then is the scene. The Great White Hunter was one other standard. As he said, the Jungle movies. In all of the Great White Hunter movies that I saw, name some. Clyde Beatty used to do seals with him. Frank Buck, Bring Him Back Alive. And then there was always the kindly benign English scientist, the butterfly Lepidopterist, who was running around with his daughter, and the big game hunter, who was the handsome, muscular Caucasian. And they're out there looking for Bigfoot or the Yeti. And they're on safari. And some of y'all see, because you see, they lie. The movies are still there. They come on 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning every damn night almost. In some of the cable studios, their only fare is some of them movies. Thank you. Plus, they're coming out now in video. And if video keeps going the way it is, in 2 or 3 years, the ones they're selling for $29.95 will be two for $5. Now, here's this obligatory scene. Africa. Movie, MGM, circa 1935. The safari plot, standard. And there's always the singing, rum. And I learned, and this is great education for me, children, I learned certain valuable things. One thing I learned was that Africans only spoke 2 simple words, Guana boss. And I knew Guana, and Guana was the word they used for everything. It meant yes, no, maybe, I'm scared, don't bother me, you know, oh shit, let's run. Right? And the various nuances was conveyed by a certain body language, the rolling of, I hear, see this, right? Now watch the impact. Here we are, African people, sitting up in the damn Jim Crow section of a movie house in Florida, Jacksonville, wherever the hell, pick your town, Savannah, and I'm watching the antics of my people on the screen, and I'm laughing at these dumb niggas. I may as well be honest about it. It's painful, but the truth, you know, it's going to make you free. You got to get that shit out. Otherwise, we ain't never going to be whole. And we'd sit up there and we'd watch, and then there would be a long shot. I don't know anything, right? And mind you, here are 4 white people. Right? Usually, sometimes, the scientist may have gotten a little sick. And he's sitting there, and here all of them up on, each one of them up on there, and here are these huge, beautiful physical specimen of African manhood, muscle ripping from here to there, ain't an ounce of fat nowhere. The shortest one is 6'4", and you see that energy. I think they rub them down with some kind of whale oil or something to make it, you know. Anyway, and these guys are going, and they're singing, and you can see that long shot like a snake, and it's almost like you're getting hypnotized, you know. And you almost clean up there, right? And then these guys sitting back in the Great White Hunter, smoking nonchalant on his pipe with his pit helmet. I never do his pit helmet either, right? And all of a sudden, in all this gaiety, and they're talking about blah, 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 and the Great White Hunter, yes, and there's other safaris I've been on, and my head boy, and down, and of course you see the head boy, quote unquote, and he's a dude maybe 35, about 9'4". Watusis preferred. And he's cracking his whip, which is 50 foot long, which means he can stand in the middle of his safari and go 100 feet, 50 that way and 50 that way, right? Flick a gnat off of the lead body man's nose. Up there, Buana! Buana, Buana. All of a sudden, you look down the long shot, and all this big heavy thing on her, and then zoom, like what, man? Like, those. Stop so suddenly, the great white hunter them almost get dumped off of there. There. What the hell's going on down there? And then you see the head Warner boy start whipping asses. Wow! Wow! God damn it, Warner! And here are these beautiful physical specimens of guys, and they're doing like that. 250 of them on the safari. Right? 4 white folks and the whipping boy. Am I lying? 4 white folks and the whipping boy. And 250 cowering men. And of course, the cower just can't be a cower. It's got to be a rolling eyeball there. Accentuated with white. You got it? No. Finally, you hear the great white hunter say, "Oomba-ba-looba there. Yah's the ball." He now speaks fluid. What the hell is going on down there? Come here. Wana. Wana. What the hell's going on down there? Oh, Wana. Men, stop. You got to get across that river tonight. No, Wana. Men don't cross that river. That river, Bigfoot country. Bad, heard strange noises over there. Nothing on them. No, Wana. What do you mean they're gone? I'm wasting this time. Go back and whip their asses some more. Wana boy. He go back, and now this time he's whipping. But these guys know that there's death, doom, and destruction on the other side of that river. And they just roll eyes 5 times as much. And, you know, and after a while, he whipped one to death, always from that. And he, ah!
But they run away in the middle of the night.
Well, either way, part of that, too. Whatever works. After all, you got to have a variation on the monotonous theme sometime. Now, the great white hunter says, "The hell with this. Nothing on the other side of that river. Give me that goddamn whip." And he starts kicking asses, taking names. And suddenly you can see that snake as it winds up. The first guy says, "Ah, get it up." Everybody picks up like it used to. Zip, boom. And they head across the river. But you're not through yet. About a quarter of the way across the river, here comes the crocodile scene. Everybody out in their water. The girl, the crocodile comes up, and he's bearing down on her. But at the last minute, he looks and he sees she's white. And he realizes that's a no-no. And zip, and he goes by her. And usually, who does he get? This beautiful, beautiful specimen of African manhood, the whipping boy, Warner Jones. And as Warner goes down, he goes, "Warner!" Which would be the occasion for us to just laugh and call dumb African names and all of these things down there. Now, as I said before, when I think about this, sometimes I could kick my own behind. But it's a classic example of how you mess over mine. And now also what I want y'all to really understand is the power that that medium has, to what it can do to you. The most absurd scene you could think of, when you analyze it, think about it. The African is in his native milieu. He's been hearing these sounds all of his life. He has been dodging crocodiles, or he knows. You've been in Africa. You know, the Africans don't go within water with crocodiles. They know when the crocodile's around. But the folks who were the experts on them things didn't know that. The white folks they hired as experts on Africa didn't know shit about Africa. And you put this out, something on the other side of the river, and the white man who just got off the airplane or the boat from England or New York, he can stand there in strange land, he's the stranger, and tell the natives, ain't nothing across that river to bother you. Now, who the hell is supposed to be scared? Who really ought to be busting his butt getting the hell out of there from strange noises? They turn reality upside down. How many of you have seen this scene played out one way or the other? All right. But you've seen them. Now, let me ask you this. Do you consider that they were degrading or not? All right. If they were degrading, who made them? Metzer, and Mayer. Now, let's quickly take a look at that history, because that rolling thing goes back to the beginning of movies. And, of course, the first full-length real movie was The Squaw Man, silent film, 1910 or something, whatever. But it's interesting, there's so many things that happened with us that from the beginning, the stereotype came first. The first recording that anybody black ever made for Thomas Edison back in the Silvers, which was probably about the third recording that was ever made of all, was made by a black man, and the name of this record was called The Laughing Song. And what it consisted of, you probably haven't been to a recording museum and seen these cylinders, these wax cylinders, which is what they look like spool, and they went around and you played them circle. And what it consisted of was a black man who for 5 minutes just laughed. And that became one of Mr. Edison's all-time first bestsellers. Already you've set the stage coming out of minstrelsy of the black individual as buffoon or clown or non-existence. The first full-length movie to make money that told a story, interestingly enough, was Birth of a Nation, 1914. D.W. Griffith, David Walk Griffith. Birth of a Nation was based on a best-selling novel by a gentleman by the name of Thomas Dixon, D-I-X-O-N, and this novel was called The Klansman. And he wasn't talking about the Scotch Highlanders. He was talking about the folks with the sheets. Now think of this. This is the first feature-length film ever made in this country, and probably almost like in the world. And what this was based on was Thomas Dixon's novel, The Klansman, and a book on the history of Reconstruction, a history of Reconstruction written by, guess who? Dr. later President Woodrow Wilson. And this was a movie that black people fought for over 40 years. I would like at some point, if I can get a print of it, I'll have, maybe one night you'll have Yusuf this, show you this to make the impact behind, because it runs about 90 minutes or 2 hours. And this movie, all of the stereotypes that have been on black folks was done. We were shown as soldiers who walked into plantation, little blonde, blue-eyed Missy, and we robbed and we raped and we killed them all. And who egged us on was our white northern officers. Naturally, like Jeffries, we still didn't know we were professed nutties. The whole theme of this was the horror that was visited on the South as a result of losing the Civil War, and how the Ku Klux Klan came to the rescue of Missy Ann after being attacked and sexually harassed and assaulted by these sex-crazed Africans. It went so far as to portray the concept that the most dangerous kind of nigger was the mulatta. That's where that stereotype came, because the mulatto represented the worst element of both races, which was just another way of saying the European was trying to get away from responsibilities from his own sexual degradation. And of course, ultimately, who comes to the rescue? And he shows the black politicians, Reconstruction politicians in South Carolina and whatnot, and he shows them sitting up there like clowns or buffoons, spitting into all of this kind of idiots. Yes, ma'am. Oh, you know that? Oh, you know about that? That is correct. Did they really do that? Of course not. Thomas, no. go look at your history of Reconstruction South Carolina. The whole goddamn public education system that you have in this country today was created by our forefathers, ex-slaves in South Carolina. There was no public free education before that. They know this. You better believe it. Right? But, you know, when you look at Reed Du Bois' Black Reconstruction, it's all been, but what they've done, they've distorted that like everything else. So what Griffith as a Southerner was doing, he was perpetuating the stereotypical lie that the thing. In other words, it was a movie set up to glorify the Ku Klux Klan and to justify, even said that killing of black folks was justified. Look at this. Now, this movie won everything over kind of award from the kitchen sink. Ran almost 2 hours. And usually when I show it to my students, since I wait to the last to tell them what I'm going to tell you, not a damn soul in that movie was black. You heard me. They would do the whiteness for certain things, whatnot, but the movie suggested there was one woman, I forget, Margaret somebody, between 1900 and 1920, she made a whole career of playing what they call mammy parts. It's all there. Read Tom's Coons. I don't know if I brought that with me. Yeah. Tom's Coons, Mulattoes, Mammies, and Bucks. An interpretive histories of blacks in American film by Donald Brogle. He's black brother, but he ain't Leonard Jeffries. Yes. Yes. There's another one, if you want to check it, called From Sambo to Superspace. Let me just come to an end. This is a book that just came out in '89. You might find it. It's called Blood and Power, Organized Crime in 20th Century America. And they're telling you what happened. I'm just going to read you one little bit. They talk about now how organized crime went. It went from the Irish to Irish Jews, and from the Jews to the Sicilians. And it didn't go that way. All the other groups, the other ethnic groups, they would work on many ways, but very quickly the word got out that the Italians would kill you. Scholar, right? Yeah. The St. Valentine's Day Massacre, which some of y'all may have heard of, really represent, even though it was not said, really represented the end of the Irish domination of crime, particularly in Chicago, which was the headquarters of the Toohey brothers, Roger Toohey. Their father was a Chicago policeman. And Dion O'Banion's fellas, they were all fighting with the Capone boys over control of bootleg liquor, etc. And one day, as you know, on St. Valentine's Day in 1929, just about 20-some people of Mr. O'Banion's people were caught in this garage by Mr. Big John Carlissimo, what they say, and Brother Alphonse Capone's men. And when that massacre was over, the dominance of the Irish gangster in America was also over. This became the rise. Now, you had Mo Dalitz, which was a Jewish gang in Cleveland. The big gangster here in your city was a gentleman by the name of Abner Longy Zwillman. He was the dude that ran the numbers and about whatnot. Came out, he started out with bootlegging here in Newark. You had the Annenberg, the same family, Walter Annenberg. His daddy, Mo Annenberg, started the wire service for horse racing. That's how the Philadelphia Inquirer started out, as a horse racing flag. Bugsy Siegel, Benjamin Coyne. In New York, you had Dutch Schultz, or Jaime Flegenheimer, Waxy Gordon. the people who came out of Murder Incorporated, all of those was Brooklyn with the Jewish mob. Abe Kidwellis. And then, this tells the whole thing. Now, the other thing you have to see, you got to see organized crime in other levels, not just crime. Say, the struggle between the FBI, quote unquote, the Treasury Department, Treasury agents, and all them law enforcement people really was not so much a struggle between law enforcement people and gangsters as it was an ethnic struggle between the WASP on one side, who saw their dominance being threatened by these Johnny-come-lately ethnic white folks. If you look at the makeup of the Attorney General's office, of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, of all of these other makeup that folks, every damn one of them was overwhelmingly WASP. They didn't even hire token Italian whatnot, and forget about Mold and Mosetta. All right? So the struggle was really played out along ethnic lines. The people who formed the temperance movement, Carrie Nation, all them people that passed the prohibition laws, all of them was WASP. Because they said that these great unwashed Eastern and Southern Europeans coming in here are destroying the morality of America. That's why Carrie Nation could walk into a saloon and smash it up, because they had created the image of the Irish as drunkards, of the Italian, every Italian wine cellar, every Italian cellar he had a grapeyard in the back and making wine in the cellar. So they equated crime with foreigners. That is why Meyer Lansky became known as the prime minister. But as this man goes on to tell you, when the Italian, I just want to read you something shortly, it says, during Prohibition, nobody in New York dared defy Oney Madden. Oney Madden was the English gangster of Irish ancestry who took over the Cotton Club from Jack Johnson, the former prize fighter, and turned it into the place where Duke Ellington come. He just took it over and left. He took it over. I want it. Now watch what happens. Roger Toohey, I just mentioned to you, the last major Irish bootlegger still alive in Chicago as Prohibition was ending, had been making concessions to the Capones for years. The Italian snatched Toohey's partner, Matt Kolb, and Toohey delivered the $50,000 ransom to Capone himself. Then Capone shook down Toohey for another $25,000. Now we're talking in the 20s and 30s. So this ain't chump change. As a matter of fact, $25,000 ain't chump change to me now. You know? All right? Capone shook down Toohey for another $25,000, and Toohey paid. Finally, Kolb was killed. In July 1933, the Capones helped stage the fake kidnapping of a noted swindler, Jake the Barber Factor, and set up Toohey to take the rap. Falsely convicted and imprisoned, Toohey was exonerated 20 years later. He served 20 years in prison. Shortly after his release from prison, as he sat on the front porch of his sister's home, they killed him. Now, there was no reason, there was no, quote, business reason to kill him, because during the 20 years, there wasn't one damn Irish gangster left in all of Chicago. Principle. In other words, you don't leave nothing unturned. Why? Yeah, you or I would say why, right? But, and after all, he wasn't Italian. He wasn't Sicilian. Never mind Italian, because it's not the same thing. Now, during Prohibition, nobody in New York dared defy Oney Madden, the dominant Irish bootlegger in town. Quote, yet even Oney, with all his power, was a frightened man. According to his Broadway companion, Walter Winchell, a great columnist, quote, he was always afraid of being betrayed or framed or killed. What a way to live. Madden attempted more legal ventures in boxing and laundry, but they tried his patience. These legitimate rackets, he complained, they ain't no sense to him. You got to wait for your money. In 1932, he went back to jail for a year after having violated parole. The warden said he was glad to have him, that Madden would be a good influence on other prisoners. When he returned to New York in 1933, Madden decided not to fight the new Italian bosses. He went south, all the way to the gangster resort of Hot Springs, Arkansas. There he married the washed daughter of a Republican postmaster, lived quietly in a house next door to the police chiefs, and controlled the rackets such as they were. In Hot Springs, every morning he would meet a train from New York to get the newspapers and greet anyone from home. But he made damn sure that he got so far that these people wouldn't even conceive that he was even thinking about challenging anything in the New Order. Now, I don't know this. Perhaps Irish gangsters who before 1920 had dominated the American underworld were unwilling to accept the subordinated terms of the new arrangement. The partnership of Italians and Jews was symbiotic, but it was not equal. According to underworld convention, Jews might have the brains, Italians still had the muscle. When it came to a showdown, muscle always won. Even Lansky, privileged as he was, had to clear his projects through his Italian masters and cut them in. Now, for Italian, just read Sicilian. He could not act on his own. Quote, Jews, outsiders, wind up on the short end in any sit-down, chaired and run by the mafia, a Jewish criminal named Michael Hellerman said later. Somehow we always wound up paying even when we was right. I was a Jew, and a Jew doesn't win in sit-downs with the Italian mob over money. That's him talking, not me. As murder formed the base of the mafia, it also established Italian authority in the affairs of organized crime. With time, the Italians took control of the power of life and death in the underworld. And listen to me carefully. Italians could kill Italians and could kill others, but others could not kill Italians or even threaten them. Later in New Jersey, a Jewish criminal, I think this is where he is, named Jerry, an associate of the mafioso Sam DeCavalcanti, one of your local fellows here, started planning his own big moves, even making threats against important people. If you're not with us, DeCavalcanti warned them elliptically, don't bother anybody that has anything to do with us. All I want is a peace, Jerry replied, not seeming to grasp the point. But I want to tell you, Jerry, the mafioso insisted, if you ever come to me and say you're going to do something to somebody outside of busting his head or leg, you're never going to walk out of this office. I'm sorry I said that. Jerry apologized in full retreat. This would never happen, believe me. From the 1930s on, any Jew in organized crime had to know his place. The Italians certainly knew theirs. Is that clear to everybody? In time, organized crime gathered vast, unpublicized power in strictly criminal activities, as well in the allied fields of labor, racketeering, and urban machine politics. Meaning Hugh Adonizio. You ever heard of him? He was once the mayor of this town, right? Okay. That's what they mean, urban machine politics. Boss Haig was once the mayor of Jersey City, right? Okay. Who runs Atlantic City? Frank Costello was able, according to Anthony Quinn, to just pick up a telephone call. We know who he spoke to. But all of Anthony Quinn's problem about trying to shoot on location in New York are over. If he wanted a street closed off to shoot a movie, he had the street closed off 3 or 4 days. And he goes on to say, a blood thread of ethnicity ran through every underworld enterprise. We better learn that. Y'all understand that? Ethnic loyalty. Gangsters in illegal pursuits, ever suspicious of each other, and with no recourse to police and state authority, needed any compensating source of mutual trust they could create. Lacking other bonds, they empathized and insisted on ethnic ties. Blood of my blood. A man from the same blood was supposed to be more trustworthy. Conversely, a hoodlum of a different ethnic background was to be watched skeptically. Ethnicity also established rough job specialties. Irish gangsters were more liable to handle politics and labor rackets. Jewish gangsters to deal in gambling and money matters. Who opened up Las Vegas? Bugsy Siegel. Cost him his life ultimately. Italian gangsters to execute violence and run the whole show. There is a Sicilian proverb which was stated to me by a Sicilian friend of mine that goes, with my brothers, I will fight my uncles. With my uncles, I will fight my cousins. With my cousins, I will fight other Sicilians. With other Sicilians, I will fight other Italians. With other Italians, I will fight the world. Thank you. Okay.
Are we going to have any questions real quick? Because I know it's late, everybody's tired.
Well,
I have one question.
I'd like something to drink. It's usually not, it's only sold on special newsstand. Right. There's a piece in there, we all see on, about Harry Truman. And it's advertised in the October issue. And this is just, it's called The Conversion of Harry Truman, who was one of our presidents. And here's a quote from him. I think one man is just as good as another, so long as he's honest and decent and not a nigger or a Chinaman. Right. Yes, ma'am. You had a question you wanted to ask.
Yes. In view of all that you've lectured here tonight about Jeffries and his credibility and why we should continue to study, but I am voting as I go along.
Yes, ma'am.
What is our other recourse? Because they're going to continue to come after him.
Yep.
We know the Zionist movement is quite strong.
Yep.
So what is our recourse as African people? That's the thing.
Our recourse, very simple, is our number. Now, that sounds like most stuff, but remember, if it comes down, let me just point something else out to you, as quiet as it kept. We have allies that they know we have, they don't know. Most Christians in this country are anti-Semitic. And if it comes to a choice, I'm not saying like, if it comes to a choice between supporting black nominal Christians or Jews, they're going to go with blacks. That comes out of the history. Because most Americans are already tired of the role that this government has been playing with Israel, etc., etc. More and more, the leadership is saying you're blowing all that money and you got people here sleeping in the street. The other fact we must remember, all Zionists, all Jews are not Zionists. There are a hell of a lot of Jews, and I know many of them, who don't like what is coming and know the truth is different. They are afraid to come out, but they're not going to support them. All right? The other thing we must understand, and my point is, I pray that they keep attacking us.
Thank you. So we can get strong.
That's exactly. Because it seems that remember, that's why I told you, I gave this whole background of what happened to the German Jews. They kept lying to themselves and deluding themselves until it was too damn late. And when they really realized what the danger was, not only on them, but their butts got burned up in the gas chamber. So remember what I said. As Frederick Douglass said over 100 years ago, sweetheart, without struggle, there ain't no progress. Power concedes nothing without a demand. Never has, and it never will. And as much as you, anybody else would like to say, I would wish our children wouldn't have to do this. The reality is that this child is not going to have to do it to the extent as we recognize what we have to do. And that means struggling all up. Everybody can't be a warrior. Some people grabbing a gun is dangerous. You kill yourself for somebody else. But we all can do something we can do. You can leave here for the night. And as you talk to people, you can share these things. All of us are teachers. And all of us are learners. I'm often said, my God, Professor Mackey, God, you know so much. How much do you know? I only know one thing, that I'll never know enough. Very simple. Yes. One question. This is two. Because, listen, and I'm not trying to cut you, but they got to get me back to New York. And I have been going, sister, and let me just say this to you, because I don't want to leave you with a bitter taste. I've been going for the last 3 weeks with Jefferson, this and other, plus my own thing. And I'm tired. I haven't been getting to bed until 3 o'clock in the morning. I had a couple of funerals. Young man, a very dear friend of mine, brother, died of a brain tumor at 37, unnecessary. The doctor screwed him up, can't find the records and all. And death is always tragic, but when mothers bury their children, this is one of the most tragic things of all. So I will beg your indulgence. I would hope we should meet again, and at such a time as we do, I will be glad to take up any question with you at length. I know I took over my time tonight, but I have a lot of stuff to do, and if I would have preferred, if the choice had to be made, to sacrifice the question to get the material here. And there will be tapes, I think, left that will be made available. May the good Lord take a liking to all of y'all, and next time, bring me some food.
Next time will be more than likely, we'll have them after the New Year. You can believe that. And keep in mind, next Sunday, okay? And I hope everyone, and have a great evening. Thank you for coming out. Next Sunday, try to bring someone with you, please. Just messing with y'all.
I'm sorry, just to make this statement. My mother, when she left for Virginia to come to Washington, D.C. to work, to go to school, to get her education, she worked as a domestic worker, and she said she was very rich. At that time, everybody referred to themselves as Gentiles, the Jews. So around that time, the Gentile families, if they had the business arrangement, had to have the Jews open dinner, they would never give them dinner in the dining room.
Oh, no.
They were always serving.
That's correct. In the kitchen or the hands who went along with the black servants.
Along with the black servants.
And they never said a damn word about
And
it.
they never said what else.
No. They are used to kicking Gentiles behind. Today. And what they are upset about is we have passed them now, they no longer have a human color. We can't expect them to sit aside and be happy about it. But we have to understand it and make sure that they don't distract us.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
When I was growing up, I could never look at an Asian man who photographed. It made me feel so bad about myself. I never could look at it. You know how many
Part of condition, yes, sir. Oh, this? Yes, it is. $20. Huh? Oh, all right. Heritage. Why, just tell me. That's all you got to do. I'll give it to you. Yeah, I think they're here. Let's see. You can call them, because they'll send you a copy. Yeah, I know that. Here. Insurance card. Oh, yeah. I think $3.95 is what I paid for it. But I'll be right. Somebody just got it. See if I can find
a book called The Final Solution.
Yeah. All right, let's see. There's a number which you can call. 800 number. But I get through it. That's the important thing. Tell your name, ask me, and I'll get a copy to her. And then you here every Sunday?
Yes.
What is your name?
I'm Sundiata.
Okay, and I'll get it and she'll get it to you.
All right.
You can